Chapter 2000. According to the information that Ling Han had obtained, there were a total of 7 levels of Sun Soul Stones. And from lowest to highest, they were red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. In other words, they had to reach the 3rd level to be able to accommodate a dividing soul. Otherwise, the Sun Soul Stone would shatter during the incubation process, and breaking through to the dividing soul tier would naturally end in failure. No wonder breaking through to the dividing soul tier was so difficult, because they had to kill powerful beings like the giant octopus. That was a Een soul level being, and even 4th Severance Emperor tiers could only flee at the mere sight of it. Thus, aside from monarch tiers, they could only kill small fish. Many a little made an ocean, making breaking through to the Yang soul tier incredibly difficult. After the Sun Soul Sea opened, it would last for a very long time before closing, but it would only last for a few hundred years. The time was not fixed. The shortest time was only over 100 years, and the longest was 700 years. It was very difficult to obtain yellow Sun Soul Stones within the longest 700 years. The 4 of them continued to fight their way towards the bottom of the sea. Obviously, the deeper they went into the sea, the stronger the beings they encountered, and the larger and purer the Sun Soul Stones they obtained. However, when they entered a certain depth, the pressure in the sea rose to a frightening level. Water was extremely soft, but at the same time, it was extremely hard. Endless water pressure descended, and even Ling Han had to grit his teeth. Strangely, even here, they could see the 7-colored rainbow on the surface of the sea, illuminating the sea brightly. A wave of water assaulted them, causing the figures of Ling Han and the others to sway slightly. They all grasped the direction that the water was surging from, and then headed towards the left. They saw that a colossal creature had appeared in front of them. This was a colossal lobster. Its green shell was similarly transparent, and they could clearly see the blood vessels and organs inside its body. At the same time, there were also multiple patterns of great Tao. It was as if it was not a living being, but rather a colossal ship, though its appearance was a little strange. The colossal lobster also fixed its eyes on them. Its 2 eyes that were as huge as lanterns exuded a sinister cold light, and it immediately changed its direction, charging towards the 4 of them. Shwa! A large pincer clamped down, and multiple seals lit up on the pincer. Those were the regulations of the great Tao of metal, adding endless destructive power to this clamp. Ling Han stretched out his hand. Pa! The big pincer clamped down on his wrist. A cruel look appeared on the large lobster's face. This was a dividing soul tier creature. Even though it was born in this strange place and only had the thought of killing, its intelligence was not low at all. Under this clamp, such a small human's hand would definitely be broken. The pincers tightened, but what they expected did not happen. Instead, multiple symbols of the great Tao appeared on Ling Han's wrist, and the light of regulations shone, blocking the pincers. I can't believe it didn't cut off this human's hand. A look of surprise appeared on the lobster's face as it continued to tighten its pincers. Golden symbols also flashed on its body, increasing the cutting power of its pincers. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You're wasting your energy. Just obediently come to my bowl." "Nyo wants to eat too," Hunyo said excitedly, her saliva flowing out. The large lobster flew into a rage. "Shwa!" Another pincer came over. "I already said you're wasting your energy." Ling Han stretched out his other hand. Pa! This time he grabbed onto the pincer. The large lobster continued to tighten its pincer, but it couldn't snap off Ling Han's hand or wrist no matter what. It was like an Earth Soul elite facing off against divine metal. How could it possibly cause any damage? Very strange, isn't it? Ling Han broke into a grin. The large lobster was furious. It finally stopped trying to snap off Ling Han's hand. Instead, it released one of its pincers, and then brandished its other pincer. With a schwa, it flung Ling Han away. Ling Han stretched out a hand and pressed behind him, releasing a burst of power that stopped his figure. Then, he rolled back and charged towards the large lobster. Hong hong hong. 1 man and 1 lobster battled. The large lobster's strength was as strong as the Earth Soul, and according to reason, even a 5th Severance Monarch tier couldn't possibly be a match for it. However, who asked Ling Han's physique to be freakishly strong. It was enough for him to exchange blows with this large lobster. However, it was difficult for the large lobster to kill Ling Han, and it wasn't easy for Ling Han to kill this large lobster, either. The battle descended into a stalemate. I don't have time to waste with you. Ling Han humphed softly and drew on the power of the Black Tower. Wang, the regulations of time were activated, and the large lobster's movements instantly became sluggish. It was as if it had suddenly turned into a block of wood. This was time-stopping. Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword and pierced it at the large lobster's eyeball. Pooh, as blood spurted out. The murderous aura of the divine demon sword wreaked havoc in the large lobster's body. Though it was only a 3-star pseudo-celestial tool, if it really entered one's body, the destructive power would at least be on par with a 5-star pseudo-celestial tool. It was only a single strike, and the life force of this large lobster was instantly and completely severed. Ling Han panted heavily. An opponent in the level of Earth Soul was indeed beyond the range of his ability to kill, and he had to use the Black Tower to suppress it. However, using an ultimate ability like stopping time would also cause him to immediately lose the ability to continue battling. Hunyo began to collect the lobster meat, while the Empress drew out the Sun Soul Stone. The stronger the creatures in the sea that they killed, the more different the Sun Soul Stone they obtained. This one shone with a green light, and was the size of a human head. In other words, this one was equivalent to the 200 from before. Ling Han thought for a moment. Continuously borrowing the power of the Black Tower, added with his own battle prowess, he should be able to reap great benefits in a few hundred years' time. But to reach the level of a purple Sun Soul Stone was practically impossible. He couldn't help but feel that it was a pity, since he was going to enter the dividing soul tier. Then he would have to barge into this domain in his strongest state. If he could not reach this standard, there would always be a knot in his heart. Whether it was martial art or alchemy, he would have to pursue the strongest, and pursue perfection. He could only do it step by step. Or perhaps he would give up this chance to break through, and wait another few million years. Afterwards, the Empress and Hunyo would naturally act as the main force, leading Ling Han and bewitching Maiden Ro in killing their way over. Recovering his vitality in the Black Tower, Ling Han recovered his battle prowess after a mere day. But if he wanted to use the ultimate power of the Black Tower again, that would be a matter of a month later. Thus, if they encountered another Earth Soul level creature of the sea, they could only flee, unless Hunyo also used her ultimate power. Ling Han did not let Hunyo use this kind of power. After all, in these seas, he had to keep a trump card no matter what. Hong! A stream of water surged over, causing Ling Han and the others to tremble. They saw a massive bonefish swim over from a very far distance, its speed extremely fast. At first, Ling Han only thought that this bonefish had discovered them, but soon discovered that something was wrong, because there was actually another person in front of this bonefish. However, they were too far away previously, so they could not see this person's appearance clearly. Only when they were much closer did they finally discover his existence. This guy, who was proud to the core and incredibly demonic, was actually being chased all over the ground by a fish. Ha 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 ha, Ling Han, we meet again. Though he was in the midst of fleeing, he did not look the slightest bit disheveled. Instead, he was laughing loudly at Ling Han. This was the end of the first chapter. Continue reading. Chapter 2001. Ugly, you've been chased until your ass is about to be ruined. And what are you still laughing about? Hunyo spoke without restraint. He laughed loudly. I can't kill it, and it can't do anything to me either. Ling Han smiled and said, why don't we join forces? Sure. Ling Han had thought that a person as proud as he would not agree to join forces. But he didn't think that the other would agree so readily, which was a bit unexpected. But he was also not a sloppy person, and immediately let out a long roar, charging towards that bony fish. Nyo too. Hunyo let out a low roar, and also charged out. The Empress was much more tsundere. Though she also charged out, she was incredibly cold, and only launched a fierce attack. As for bewitching Maiden Ro, she could only act on the sidelines. At this time, a fourth Severance Emperor tier had the greatest gap in strength with a Monarch tier. Peng Ling Han charged up, and that bony fish immediately whipped its tail at him. Peng he was sent flying, unable to resist at all. He suddenly realized. No wonder he was being chased everywhere. This bony fish's battle prowess was indeed astonishing. However, his physique was too tough, and only Heaven Soul elites in the Dividing Soul tier could cause real damage to him. As for Earth Soul, it was already very good to barely make him bleed a little. Ling Han charged back at the first instant, drawing power from the Black Tower. He activated teleportation, and with a flash, he reappeared in front of the bony fish. The Divine Demon Sword was drawn, and he waved it. He acted as the main force, restraining the bony fish's attack, while the others took the opportunity to unleash their full battle prowess, madly venting their attacks on this large fish. In terms of raw power, the bony fish could crush any one of the four, but when it was restrained by Ling Han, it could allow the Empress, Hunyeo, and Yi to fully unleash their terrifying battle prowess. This kind of attack, even if the bony fish was strong enough to be at the peak stage of Earth Soul tier, it could not withstand it, and began to break one after another. However, this bonefish was extremely ferocious, and refused to retreat no matter what. It was determined to fight to the death with Ling Han. If it had been a normal Earth Soul elite, then he would only have to turn around and kill the Empress and the others first, and then slowly fight with Ling Han. At least he would be able to guarantee that he would not be at a disadvantage. However, this bonefish was a little stubborn. It would stare at whoever hit it the hardest. Therefore, Ling Han became its main target. It would bite and eat Ling Han before turning around to deal with the others. This sealed its fate. It would be slowly ground to death by Ling Han and the others. Few Earth Soul level water creatures are really hard to kill. Ling Han couldn't help but say ruefully. If the Black Tower's time stop could be used at any time, then even the peak stage of the Earth Soul stage would be insta-killed in one move, which was easy and enjoyable. Your defense is pretty good. He licked his lips, gold and silver light flashing wildly in his eyes as if his fighting spirit was soaring. I guess it is impossible to tear your physique apart now. Ling Han smiled faintly. Indeed, as he said in the Severing Mundane tier, there was definitely no one that could threaten him. Except for Ji Wuming. This person was the reincarnation of a celestial king, and could even make Xu Yaring, who was also a reincarnation of a celestial king, kneel before him in an extremely lowly manner. What kind of wondrous technique did a ninth heaven celestial king master? He definitely could not be careless, or he wouldn't even know how he died. Yo, everyone is here. A clear voice rang out, and an elegant figure appeared, striding over on the water waves with a faint smile on his face. Who else could it be but Ji Wuming? This person was really persistent, coming just as they were talking about him. Ugly, what do you want? Hunyeo jumped out. This was the only person that could make her suffer a loss in the same tier, making her angry and want to fight. The smile on Ji Wuming's lips widened slightly, and he said, "Of course it is to take your lives to help me walk the path to the pinnacle, and trample through this heaven and earth. You all do not have to feel sad. Being able to contribute to me is equivalent to contributing to the whole celestial realm, and future generations will forever remember you all. Ugly people always make trouble," the Empress rebuked coldly, similarly filled with anger. Ji Wuming's eyes swept over them, and he smilingly said, "Your levels are too low, and are completely unable to understand everything that I have done, and I have no intention of letting you all understand either. You only need to know that your deaths are not meaningless." Xiao he charged out, his first target going straight for Bewitching Maiden Ro. Though he had been strong as a ninth heaven celestial king in his last life, and his battle prowess at the same time in this life had even surpassed that of his last life, he did not have the slightest bit of arrogance. Instead, he was incredibly pragmatic. Against a large group of enemies, then he would definitely tear an opening at the weakest point. This could be said to be the complete opposite of the bonefish from before. It should be known that Ji Wuming had been a ninth heaven celestial king in his last life, and it was possible that he had always spent the later part of his life in some battlefield of slaughter. His battle experience, especially in dealing with encirclement, was extremely rich. With this move, he directly targeted the weakest link among Ling Han and the others. Ling Han hurriedly stretched out a hand and pressed down, drawing bewitching maiden Ro into the Black Tower. Facing Ji Wuming was like facing that bonefish previously, but his intelligence and battle experience were who knew how many times greater than that big guy from before. And the danger level was astonishingly high. They had to be careful, and even more careful. Hee. Ji Wuming looked at Ling Han meaningfully. Then I'll start with you first. Though the power of your divine fetus is not strong, the treasures that you have are something that I must obtain. He turned his hand into a claw and pressed it down on Ling Han's head. Wung. Multiple rays of regulations rippled, and there was a total of 9 colors. Instantly, Ling Han felt a huge pressure. Even his godly bones clanged as if they were about to break. What a terrifying guy. Heh! Ling Han exclaimed softly, and raised his divine demon sword, slashing out at Ji Wuming. It was precisely the heaven-destroying 9 swords. Little Yuan's heaven-destroying 9 swords has fallen into your hands, so it can't be considered a disgrace, Ji Wuming said with a smile. His figure slanted, and he did not fight head-on with Ling Han. Instead, he took advantage of the opportunity to charge toward the Empress. Pung. He turned his claw into a fist, and threw 7 punches in a row. As each punch passed, a circular symbol would appear, and they pressed down on the Empress. Though the Empress resisted with all her might, the 7 symbols were incredibly frightening and indestructible. They actually suppressed the Empress, and it was as if 7 celestial mountains were pressing down on her head, making her unable to move. Ji Wuming showed a smile that was filled with killing intent, and his right hand grabbed toward the top of the Empress's head. Ling Han was shocked. So it turned out that Ji Wuming had only been feigning an attack on him, and his true target was the Empress. He hurriedly pressed his left hand lightly toward himself and said, "Exchange." Boom! Ji Wuming's palm pressed down, yet he discovered to his surprise that the Empress's figure had become blurry, and in its place, it had become Ling Han. As the palm landed, numerous runes lit up, and the top of Ling Han's head caved in. However, it did not shatter, and he was sent flying. This was because Ling Han had used the spatial power of the Black Tower. He could exchange positions with anyone who had been imprinted with a specific spatial symbol. But there was a distance limit. He had placed a spatial mark on the Empress, Hunyo, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and even Bewitching Maiden Ro. Just then, it was precisely this that had saved the Empress' life. Otherwise, if this palm had landed on the Empress's body, even if the Empress had 9 doppelgangers to share the damage evenly, she would still be unable to avoid death. Ji Wuming is so perverted. Chapter 2002. It wasn't that Ling Han hadn't seen elites before. Many people could easily defeat him in the past, but it wasn't because their cultivation level was higher than his. And when their cultivation level was the same, or even close, he could turn the tables on them. Ji Wuming was the only exception. They were all 5th severance, and their cultivation level had reached the ceiling, so it could be said that they couldn't be any more similar. In terms of foundation, Ling Han was confident that he had already cultivated every aspect to a perfect level, and couldn't possibly improve any further. Thus, no matter what, he shouldn't lose to Ji Wuming. However, reality was so cruel. He was no match for Ji Wuming, and not just by a little, but by a very large margin. If it weren't for the fact that he had also cultivated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and his physique was incredibly tough, he would have long since been killed by Ji Wuming many times over. Ling Han stood still, and touched the bump on his head, his expression even more shocked. Ji Wuming's strike could almost shatter his skull. A reincarnated 9th Heaven Celestial King was indeed ridiculously strong. Ling Han could conclude that the other could be so strong because he had definitely used an ability that surpassed the 5th severance. To say that a reincarnated 9th Heaven Celestial King didn't have some special ability, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Possessing Celestial King power was like possessing 9 Heavens Flame and Xianing Source Water. And they were 9 Heavens Flame and Xianing Source Water that had reached 9th Heaven. The blazing flame's lightning strike would immediately waved lightly, activating the source power of wood. The bump on Ling Han's head immediately returned to its original state. Just how much power of regulation had Ji Wuming grasped back then? With such a treasure, it really is hard to kill. Ji Wuming frowned slightly. Xiao he moved again, and this time his target was Hunyao. Ugly Nyo won't beat you to death. Hunyao shouted loudly. You stinky guy, you didn't hit Nyo the first and second time. Are you not fond of Nyo? Nyo is very angry. The little girl roared repeatedly, and a massive rock appeared behind her. With a flap of its wings, it whipped towards Ji Wuming, and with a wave of her tail, it raised a sky-high wave that similarly smashed towards Ji Wuming. If you were Iyun's reincarnation, I would give you some leeway. Unfortunately, you only have her martial art brand, Ji Wuming said indifferently. Let me extract it. He stretched out his hand and slapped at the top of Hunyo's head, obviously intending to shatter Hunyo's mind. So infuriating. Hunyo raised her hands to meet the attack, and the silhouette of the rock almost solidified. One after another, simple and unadorned symbols lit up, exuding a magnificent aura that could suppress the heavens. Yet Ji Wuming did not care in the slightest. His hands turned into palms, fingers, and fists, slapping, poking, and striking at will. However, any casual movement was perfect, easily suppressing the projection of the rock, and also suppressing Hunyo to the point where she could only parry. A reincarnated ninth heaven celestial king, was this invincible? Ling Han and he roared unceasingly, chasing after them, attacking from the left and right. Ji Wuming grinned, and with a shake of his body, two figures emerged from his body. They looked exactly the same as him, and they charged towards Ling Han and Yi. It was similar to the Empress doppelganger technique. Ling Han exchanged blows with one of the figures, and immediately discovered that this was completely Ji Wuming. Whether it was his aura or strength, they could not be any more real. This was definitely not a doppelganger. A thought immediately welled up in his mind. Doppelganger. After advancing into the dividing soul tier, every cultivator could possess 4 doppelgangers, namely heaven, earth, yin, and yang. Because these 4 doppelgangers had been removed from the main body, there was essentially no difference between them and the main body. But Ji Wuming was clearly only at the severing mundane tier. Theoretically, this should be impossible. However, Ji Wuming had been a celestial king in his last life, and a supreme being of the 9th heaven at that. Then, it did not seem strange that he could break this iron rule, and possess some special abilities. Peng. Ling Han exchanged a blow with this doppelganger of Ji Wuming's, and he was immediately blocked. However, this doppelganger of Ji Wuming actually shuddered, and slowly turned into nothingness. It disappeared. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. Ji Wuming could indeed use the abilities of the dividing soul tier, but he had only been a 9th heaven celestial king in his last life, after all, and could not surpass the limits of this heaven and earth. Thus, the power of his doppelganger was also limited, at least in terms of time. It disappeared after blocking a single attack from Ling Han. On the other side, he was also blocked by Ji Wuming's doppelganger. He humphed and continued to attack Ji Wuming, but taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Wuming had already completely suppressed Hunyo. Logically, Hunyo should not be so passive, but Ji Wuming seemed to know Hunyo's abilities like the back of his hand. Each of Hunyo's attacks seemed to be within his expectations. So how could this be played? In just a few dozen moves, Hunyo was already in imminent danger, and when Ling Han and Yi tried to catch up to her a few times, they were blocked by Ji Wuming's doppelganger. Though it disappeared very quickly, it could quickly be used again, which was practically unstoppable. Seeing that Hunyo could not hold on for much longer, Ling Han could only use the power of the Black Tower again, and switch places with her. Ji Wuming was not surprised, and instead showed a sneer. I've been waiting for you. He clenched his right hand into a fist, and punched at Ling Han's mind. Wang, 9-colored celestial light condensed, and actually turned into a sword, which directly descended. An indescribable coldness instantly surged up in Ling Han, and he felt that this sword really had the ability to kill him. He hurriedly activated the power of his divine fetus. Hong! His whole body turned into a ball of blazing flames, condensing into an incredibly ancient character. Even in this region of the sea, it burned fiercely, dazzling the 9 heavens. Pooh! Ji Wuming's sword pierced down, blasting into the blazing flames. Ling Han swept up the flames, and with a flash, he had already appeared 300 meters away. The flames on his body gradually extinguished, and shockingly, there was a large hole on the left side of his skull, from which blood was gushing out. Just then, Ji Wuming's sword had almost destroyed both his body and soul. It was too terrifying. It was obviously not a celestial tool, and was only the fusion of 9 flashes of celestial light, but its destructive power was indescribably terrifying, and even Ling Han's physique could not block it. Moreover, this was after Ling Han had activated the power of his divine fetus, and dodged with all his might. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape, and would have been forced to use rising from the ashes. Ji Wuming looked slightly surprised and said, "The brand of great Tao of the Heavenly Fire King, brat, you are really quite lucky to have escaped even this." His main attack on Hunyo was actually a bait, and that was to make Ling Han use the spatial exchange. Though this could save him, it also put Ling Han in a disadvantageous position, and he could only passively take a beating, which created a perfect opportunity for Ji Wuming to attack. Unfortunately, Ling Han still escaped with his life. Ling Han activated his source power and healed the wound on his forehead, but there was 9-colored celestial light wreaking havoc inside, preventing the wound from healing. Even the fiery flames and lightning strike were practically powerless, and his recovery speed was frighteningly slow. He then activated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, combined with the Heavenly Venerate Tear cultivation technique, and the source power of heaven and earth, and only then did his recovery speed slightly increase. "Don't fight on your own, or you will only be defeated one by one," Ling Han said in a low voice. In terms of battle experience, even if they added up their numbers by 100 million, they still might not be a match for Ji Wuming. Thus, they definitely could not fight randomly anymore. Chapter 2004. Above blue were indigo and purple. Generally speaking, yellow could accommodate a subsoul, but the strength of the subsoul formed in this way was limited, and would definitely be far inferior to the main body. According to the standards of the severing mundane tier, this should be considered as barely severing mundane tier. You have broken through to the dividing soul tier, but you are the weakest dividing soul tier. Green was slightly stronger, and could be regarded as corresponding to an ordinary severing mundane tier. Blue, that was corresponding to a flawless severance. From this aspect, using a blue-quality Sun Soul Stone to break through was already very good, but there was still a severing mundane tier that could strike the heaven and earth, and there was also a 5th severance. In the dividing soul tier, there were naturally options that were above perfect. That was to use indigo and purple Sun Soul Stones to break through. The problem was that he didn't have enough time. Every time he upgraded a grade, he would need 200 times more. Correspondingly, he would need 200 times more time. In theory, it would take more than 100 years to reach blue quality. How long would it take to reach indigo? And how long would it take to reach purple? Perfect. This sounded pretty good, but Ling Han wasn't satisfied. To him, only a purple Sun Soul Stone could be considered perfect, and the opponent he had to defeat was Ji Wuming. Blue quality Sun Soul Stone breakthrough not enough. Then let's go to the bottom of the sea. Small Tower suddenly said. Every time the Yang Soul seashore closes, all the living creatures will die, and then a new batch of living creatures will slowly be born. And at the bottom of the sea, there will be the remains of these creatures. Ling Han was enlightened. If there are immortal palace realm living beings, then there will be indigo, or even purple Sun Soul Stones. At least you're not completely stupid, Small Tower said in disdain. As expected, the Tsundra Tower could not change his poisonous tongue. Ling Han shook his head, and couldn't be bothered to argue with it. No wonder. This place was only open for a limited time, and they couldn't allow dividing soul tier, or even immortal palace tier elites to enter. If they relied on severing mundane tiers to fight for themselves, how could they possibly obtain a purple-level Sun Soul Stone? Not even Ji Wuming could do it. It's almost impossible for others to go to the bottom of the ocean, because their physiques aren't strong enough. Even if they use their origin power to form a defense, there will come a time when their strength is exhausted, and they will be suppressed to death in the ocean. But I'm different. My physique won't weaken at any time or place. Ling Han said in his heart, and immediately informed the three women. The Empress and Hunyo naturally would not have any objections, and immediately nodded and entered into the Black Tower. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro was bargaining and wanted Ling Han to also get a purple Sun Soul Stone for her. Yet she was directly picked up by Ling Han and thrown into the Black Tower. Only then did Ling Han head towards the deep sea. Before long, the water pressure began to increase wildly. However, Ling Han's physique was simply too powerful. Just based on that alone, even Ji Wuming could only admit defeat. Ling Han did not mind at all. He did not have to take Hunyo and the others into consideration, so he naturally had nothing to worry about. He continued to dive deeper. After half a day, he had dived twice as deep as before, then tripled. At this point, even his physique could not take it anymore. Thankfully, he had the Black Tower. If he could not take it, he could hide inside and recover his strength. Unlike others, even if they had spatial god tools, they would have to use their own origin power and regulations to protect them at this time. Otherwise, they would definitely be crushed by the water pressure. At this depth, the bottom of the sea was not far. It was about a few hundred meters away, and could be seen with the naked eye. Since that was the case, there was no need to stand at the bottom of the sea. Ling Han swam, searching for the remains of living beings at the bottom of the sea. This depth was definitely difficult for anyone else to reach. The whole area of the sea was as quiet as a graveyard, with no waves stirring. This allowed the visibility to be extremely high, and Ling Han could see a large area with a single sweep of his eyes. The underwater world was boundless, and there was only endless fine white sand. If this was not the bottom of the sea, anyone would think that this was a vast desert. He swam at a height close to the bottom of the sea. After swimming for a day, his eyes suddenly lit up. A small mountain appeared in front of him. The vast bottom of the sea was a stretch of white sand, so how could there be a small mountain? Because this was not a small mountain, but the remains of a giant sea creature. Since it was so large, the Sun Soul Stone left behind must also be extraordinarily large. Ling Han channeled celestial techniques and activated the source power of water, which could display extraordinary effects in this part of the sea. At this depth, his physique could not completely support it, and he had to borrow the power of regulations. He continued to descend, and saw that this was a giant tortoise, truly as tall as a mountain. Most of its body was still in a good state, but a small part had begun to corrode. Ling Han stabbed out with his sword, but the divine demon sword actually could not damage this giant tortoise's body. So tough. He tried a few times, but was unable to succeed. He could only turn to the place where the corrosion had begun, and stabbed in again. This time he succeeded in cutting in. The shell of the giant tortoise was too thick, and even the skin was not something that Ling Han could damage now. He could only enter through the hole he had made. This was a colossal creature, and just one of its feet was comparable to a mountain peak. Ling Han cut his way through the thistles and thorns, and spent 4 days before finally arriving at the head of the giant tortoise. Sun Soul Stone Indigo. Ling Han could not help but be overjoyed. This piece of Sun Soul Stone in front of him was slightly larger than his person. As expected, there was a fortuitous encounter here. Ling Han stored this piece of Sun Soul Stone into the Black Tower, and also cut some of the tortoise's flesh into it. Although this giant tortoise had already died for 100 million years, because its level was too high, its flesh was still maintained in a very fresh state. If it was not for the fact that this giant tortoise was too large and could not be stored in its entirety, and also because time was limited, so he could not store too much, Ling Han would definitely not be satisfied with this little gain. He shared the joy of victory with the 3 women in the Black Tower, and then continued on his way. Indigo quality was not his goal, and even the fused purple Sun Soul Stone was not, but a naturally formed purple Sun Soul Stone. Even in such an isolated sea region, sea creatures could grow to their heart's content, but those that reached the level of heavenly soul could still be counted on one's fingers. Ling Han spent 10 years, and only obtained 14 indigo Sun Soul Stones. However, a purple Sun Soul Stone was still far away in the foreseeable future. Ling Han calculated the time. Using at least 100 years to calculate, fusing a purple sun soul stone would be pitiful. But to obtain a natural one seemed even further away. Let's search. Ling Han continued his search. Sometimes he was lucky and could find 2 or 3 pieces in a year. But sometimes he was unlucky and did not find anything for 2 or 3 years. One of the reasons was that he encountered powerful sea creatures that chased him all over the place. So where would he have the time to search for sun soul stones? Time passed quickly, and 100 years had already passed. But there was not the slightest change in the sea, as if it would forever remain in this state. According to the experience of others, Ling Han took a look at the 7 rainbows. One of them became white, while the other 6 remained their original color. When the Sun Soul Sea was about to close, the 7 rainbows would all become white, and at that time, there would still be a buffer period of about 100 years before it would truly close. Based on this calculation, there were still about 700 years left. Would 700 years be enough to find 1, or even more purple Sun Soul stones? Chapter 2005. In such a deep sea region, Ling Han was not worried that Ji Wuming could find him. Ji Wuming's battle prowess was indeed strong, but in terms of defense, Ling Han could guarantee that he was definitely the strongest among his peers. Even Ji Wuming could only call him brother, even if he had been a 9th heaven celestial king in his last life. However, this was also very boring. There was only Ling Han here. And not only did the scenery never change, there was not the slightest bit of sound. It was like a living hell. Thankfully, Ling Han could still enter the Black Tower, and there were 4 women inside to keep him company. Another 300 years passed, and the indigo sun soul stones that Ling Han harvested became more and more, reaching almost 200, but there was not a single purple sun soul stone. He was slightly anxious. Half of the time had already passed, and he could only gather 1 fused purple sun soul stone. Putting aside the fact that everyone had a natural purple sun soul stone, even if they synthesized it, they could only barely gather 1. But what could he do? Ling Han patiently swam at the bottom of the sea, searching for the remains of sea creatures. Year after year, time passed very quickly. The 7 colors also became 2 colors, and most of the bands of light had already turned white, shining over the sea region. Ling Han suddenly discovered that the seawater was surging. The sea surface was not calm, but after coming to such a deep sea region, everything became incredibly quiet. But now there was suddenly a surge of water, which could only mean one thing. Either a massive sea creature was attacking, or a great change had occurred in the sea region. The current situation was the latter. A canyon actually appeared in front of Ling Han. It was not very big, about 5 miles long. The entrance was very small, and then enlarged. The widest part was also about 5 miles, forming a triangle. The reason there was a surge of water was because the seawater was pouring into the canyon, and thus forming a driving force. Ling Han couldn't help but be curious. He moved with the waves, drifting towards that canyon. When he arrived at the entrance of the canyon, he shockingly discovered that there was actually an invisible wall in front of him, preventing him from continuing forward. And what was similarly blocked, aside from him, was the seawater. In other words, the canyon was actually dry. It was very strange. Since seawater could not enter the canyon, how did the undercurrent form? Ling Han rubbed his chin and thought for a while before decisively giving up. There were too many inconceivable things in the world, and it was completely unrealistic to try to understand them one by one. Therefore, he did not need to worry about the reason for the formation of this canyon. Instead, he needed to find a way to enter it. At the bottom of the sea, a canyon without seawater suddenly appeared. Who would believe that it was not a little strange? Ling Han punched out. Pung! The invisible wall in front of him immediately fluctuated, as if it was made of liquid. It undulated continuously, and only after a long while did it stop. It didn't break. Ling Han was surprised. He punched out again. This time, he used the slaughter rules, and his destructive power skyrocketed. Pung! His fist struck the water wall, causing a ripple, but the water wall still did not break. Could it not be broken? Ling Han was unconvinced. He unleashed his immortal arts and began to attack wildly. Boom, 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 boom. He used all the immortal arts that he could use, but this invisible wall was indescribably tough. It would not break no matter how strong the power it endured. At most, it only swayed a few times. Ling Han drew out the divine demon sword. Since he could not use his bare hands, he would use a celestial tool. He used the heaven-destroying 9 swords. Shwa! It struck the water wall. This time, the water wall did not even fluctuate. Yet Ling Han showed an expression of joy. Water was extremely soft, and no matter how strong brute force was, it could not truly destroy it, because water could bear the brute force. The few punches he had thrown out just now were like this. He had clearly struck a point, but in the end, it would be absorbed by the whole Sun Soul Sea. In this way, no matter how strong Ling Han was, he could not possibly destroy the Sun Soul Sea, right? But now, when the divine demon sword struck out, there was no ripple. It was not that the attack power was weaker, but that the power truly struck a point, and did not let the power overflow, allowing the whole Sun Soul Sea to share the burden. This point was on the tip of the divine demon sword. Boom, seawater surged in, and Ling Han was also brought in with the seawater. He immediately stood still, and saw that there was seawater flowing forward under his feet, but the speed was becoming slower and slower. He turned back, and saw that the seawater that was surging in was decreasing, because the hole that had been created was shrinking. This wall had the ability to repair itself. In a short while, the invisible wall had completely repaired itself, and the naked eye could no longer see the existence of this wall. It was because the seawater had been blocked, forming a cross-section. Interesting, Ling Han murmured, and felt his whole body relax. Because there was no seawater here, there naturally would not be water pressure. He waved his hand, and instantly, the Empress, Wuxia bewitching Maiden Ro, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were all released by him. What is this place? Wuxia blinked her large eyes, and looked around curiously. The Empress of the Sun Soul Sea was also surprised and looked at Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and said, "It is still the seabed of the Sun Soul Sea, but the environment here is more special. There is a natural barrier that has blocked the seawater." "So fun," Wuxia said, clapping her hands with a smile. She had a strong urge to rush over and play. Ling Han hurriedly pulled her back. This little girl was gluttonous and fun, so it was definitely not just a thought. "What is this place?" Bewitching Maiden Ro looked around. "Let's search." The 5 of them split up a little, and began to search in the valley. This valley was very small, and even an ordinary person would not need much time to make a full circle. What more elites like them? There seems to be something here. Wuxia stopped, and started to dig around on the ground. Ling Han walked over, and saw that there was actually a sharp spike sticking out of the ground. At first glance, it looked like a protruding stone pillar, but it was very sharp. However, as Wuxia separated the surrounding crushed rocks and soil, she discovered that this stone pillar was becoming longer and longer. Wuxia dug deeper and deeper, and this stone pillar also grew from a foot long to 3 meters long. Finally, a giant skull actually appeared. This was the remains of a giant creature, buried in the soil at the bottom of the valley. Only the single horn on its head was exposed a little, and Wuxia just happened to find it. When this giant creature was completely dug out, Ling Han and the others could only look up at it. It was very large. Indigo Sun Soul Stone. Wuxia immediately clapped her hands, and took out the Sun Soul Stone from the giant creature's skull. How could there be the remains of a sea creature here? Ling Han rubbed his chin in thought. Connecting it with the surging water flow from before, he could not help but have a guess. Could it be that after the nearby sea creatures died, their remains would be transported here by the water flow? That wall might not block dead things. If that's the case, then how many Sun Soul Stones would there be in this valley? Chapter 2006. Ling Han and the others became excited. They hurriedly split up again, and began to dig underground. "I found one." "I also found one." Their voices rose and fell as they discovered the remains of many sea creatures. Most of them were heavenly soul-level corpses that produced indigo Sun Soul Stones, and a small portion were blue. To others, These were precious treasures, but now Ling Han and the others disdainfully tossed them into their spatial god tools. Needing 200 pieces to fuse into one indigo sun soul stone. What was it if not of little value? However, they didn't have the habit of throwing it away, so they set it aside first. According to this rate of harvesting, they only needed 1 or 2 months' time to each harvest 200 indigo sun soul stones, and then fuse them into a purple one, advancing into the dividing soul tier with the highest quality sun soul stone. This should be the graveyard of sea creatures, and the weaker ones would be completely corroded before the seawater washed here. Thus, those that could come here were at least Earth Soul level, and could contribute blue sun soul stones. But so what if others knew? Could they come here? No one's origin power or power of regulation could last that long, and would be crushed into dregs by the water pressure before even swimming to a similar depth. Only Ling Han was capable of accomplishing something that others could not. A big guy has appeared. Ling Han dug a place, and after exposing a part of the corpse of a sea creature, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. This was a swordfish, completely golden, and even if it had died countless years ago, there was no sign of corrosion. There were also many symbols of great Tao on its body, exuding a dignified aura, as if it could unleash its might at any moment and suppress the world. Immortal Palace Tier. The 4 women all exclaimed in surprise. Since heavenly soul-level sea creatures could produce indigo sun soul stones, then what about immortal palace tiers? Purple. You guys go search again. There should be more than one immortal palace tier corpse here, Ling Han said. What was buried in this undersea cemetery should not only be sea creatures from 100 million years ago, but also those from 200 million years ago, 300 million years ago, and the accumulation of countless hundreds of millions of years was what made this place full of treasures. And the 4 women split up. Ling Han naturally wasn't in the mood to care about the remains of other sea creatures. As long as he could dig out the sun soul stone in this swordfish's body, that was a natural purple sun soul stone, truly of the highest grade. Pooh, he stabbed down with his sword, but the swordfish's eyeballs were full of toughness. After being slightly sunken in, the 7 glyphs lit up, and he was instantly bounced back. The eyeball wasn't bad. How tenacious! Ling Han was astonished. One had to realize that even if it was an immortal palace tier elite, so what? In a situation where they weren't on guard, they could definitely be slaughtered by severing mundane tier elites. Unless it was someone like him, who was born with a powerful physique, and was always in the best state of defense. But this swordfish had been dead for countless years, and its defense was still so strong. He must have been born with a strong physique. Fuck, isn't this creating trouble for me? Ling Han sighed, and tried to move the swordfish into the Black Tower. He carefully spread out his divine sense, and surrounded the swordfish. On the swordfish's body, glyphs flickered faintly as if it had discovered Ling Han's actions, but there was no strong backlash, so Ling Han didn't stop, and continued to surround it. This was indeed a big guy, but compared to the other giants in the sea, it was still quite slim. Less than an hour later, Ling Han showed a hint of joy. Success! He had already used his divine sense to completely envelop this swordfish. Come! Xiao! This large swordfish disappeared without a trace, naturally entering into the Black Tower. Ling Han's figure flashed, and he also entered into the Black Tower. Though the power of the Black Tower was limited by his cultivation level, it was definitely much stronger than his, and the power of the Black Tower was endless, so he didn't have to worry about exhausting it. Small tower, come help. Ling Han once again began to dissect the large swordfish. Small tower slowly appeared, and said, Yo, you're in luck, actually letting you encounter the remains of an immortal palace tier sea creature. Ling Han was speechless. This Tsundra Tower would feel uncomfortable if it didn't insult him for a day. Hurry up and help. Though small tower was Tsundra, everything it did was for Ling Han's benefit. Thus, though it kept on insulting him, it began to use the power of the Black Tower to help Ling Han dissect this large fish. Even so, it still took 3 days of effort to cut open the fish's head. As expected, a purple sun soul stone. Ling Han laughed loudly. This was really a perfect ending. He exited the Black Tower, and saw that the Empress, Bewitching Maiden Ro, and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were still searching, and Wuxia was sitting on a large crab, swinging her long legs as she nibbled on a drumstick, looking incredibly leisurely. This wasn't the little girl being absent-minded, but rather that she had already found the remains of an immortal palace tier sea creature. How lucky! Ling Han couldn't help but smile. That's true, Wuxia is too awesome. Wuxia didn't know how to be modest at all. Ling Han released his divine sense, and did the same thing, drawing this large crab into the Black Tower. Then, he spent 7 days to successfully cut it open. It couldn't be helped. The large crab's defenses were even thicker, and the Black Tower couldn't fully unleash its might, either, so he could only cut it bit by bit. When they exited the Black Tower, the Empress also found something. Of course, it was also the remains of an immortal palace tier sea creature. This made Bewitching Maiden Ro anxious to death. Ling Han and the others all had perfect Sun Soul stones, and only she was still searching bitterly. She hurriedly put in a good word for the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, asking her to help her search. In any case, the latter hadn't even broken through to the severing mundane tier, so it was useless for her to have Sun Soul stones. This thing couldn't be brought out, and could only be used here. When Ling Han also cut open a Sun Soul stone for the Empress, Bewitching Maiden Ro finally had a great harvest. It could only be said that this place was practically a treasure trove of Sun Soul stones. Now the 4 severing mundane tiers all had purple Sun Soul stones. Break through to the dividing soul tier. The 4 of them separated slightly, and a Sun Soul stone that wasn't much smaller than a house was placed in front of them. Entering into the Sun Soul Sea, the majority of the time was actually spent on searching for Sun Soul stones, and breaking through to the dividing soul tier would only take a month or so. The prerequisite was that you had already touched the doorstep of the dividing soul tier, and coming here was only the beginning. Ling Han and the others had already reached the peak stage of the severing mundane tier a few hundred years ago, and touched the doorstep of the dividing soul tier. They only lacked the Sun Soul stone to complete the final step. They all shook their spirits, wanting to separate a portion into the Sun Soul stone to become their own dividing soul. It was equivalent to having an additional external incarnation. Don't use your own spirit, Small Tower suddenly spoke up. Divide one of the 3 source powers of heaven and earth in your body. Small Tower did not explain why, and continued to instruct Ling Han on what to do. Why? Ling Han was a person who always had to get to the bottom of everything. Small Tower sighed. The source powers of heaven and earth have their own consciousness in the first place, and after you divide them, the independence and growth of the dividing soul will be better. Furthermore, dividing your own spirit is a kind of destruction to your own body. Though after reaching the immortal palace tier, the dividing soul will all return. Destruction is destruction, and there will be flaws. Using the source powers of heaven and earth as a substitute is the most perfect way to break through to the dividing soul tier. Chapter 2008. I wonder how big the gap is between me and Ji Wuming, Ling Han said. He did not believe that Ji Wuming could also obtain a natural purple Sun Soul stone. And even if he used a fused purple Sun Soul stone to break through, then the gap in strength between him and Ling Han would shrink. How could he not catch up? Ling Han did not know either. The reincarnation of a 9th heaven celestial king was really too awesome. Heaven knew what terrifying celestial techniques Ji Wuming possessed. Then let's battle. Ling Han's eyes burned, his fighting spirit soaring. They searched in the canyon for a few more months, but did not find any more purple Sun Soul stones, though there were quite a few indigo ones. Let's go sell things. The 4 women re-entered the Black Tower. Ling Han used the divine demon sword to break through the invisible wall, broke through the water, and then floated towards the surface of the sea. After breaking through to the dividing soul tier, his physique had improved greatly, and added with the increase in strength, even the water pressure at the bottom of the sea was no threat to him. Furthermore, because he had broken through in this sea region, the heaven and earth would not deliberately target him. Otherwise, if a dividing soul tier entered this place, it would only be death. Ling Han released the 9 heavens flame, and the 2 exchanged a smile. The 9 heavens flame quickly left, Of course, to sell Sun Soul Stones. Ling Han released the Empress, Hunyao, and Bewitching Maiden Ro from the Black Tower. Actually, only Bewitching Maiden Ro was slightly inferior. The Empress and Hunyao could already withstand the water pressure at the bottom of the sea. As they walked, they killed sea creatures along the way. In any case, after the Sun Soul Sea closed this time, all living creatures would die, so they might as well make some contributions. There's someone ahead. Ling Han's eyes were sharp, and discovered that there was a person fighting fiercely with sea creatures ahead. The four of them all swam forward. Sherdu was a king. In his own territory, he was a peerless genius. However, after coming to the Sun Soul Sea, he discovered that there were kings everywhere. There were also quite a few sovereigns, and sovereigns were even higher up than him. He could only look up to them. He put away his usual arrogance, and obediently fought in the sea region, hunting sea creatures and refining Sun Soul Stones. His goal was very simple, it was the blue Sun Soul Stone. Originally, this wasn't very likely to happen, but who asked the Sun Soul Sea to be opened for such a long time this time? He had nearly 800 years to hunt, and then fuse all the Sun Soul Stones together. Then the possibility of obtaining a blue Sun Soul Stone was not low. However, the fighting bullfish that he encountered this time was really hard to kill. Its strength was not below his at all. If it wasn't for his low IQ, he didn't even want to continue fighting. It was too dangerous, and it would cause him to be seriously injured, or even have the possibility of dying. Hong, the fighting bullfish, charged over with a terrifying might. Resplendent runes shone on its two horns, causing the might of this collision to be incomparably terrifying. Sherdu hurriedly raised all his spirit. The power of this collision was extremely strong, and he could not underestimate it. He blasted a punch towards the fighting bullfish. He suddenly froze, because the fighting bullfish actually stopped moving the moment it collided with him. Pung pung pung. His fist force blasted on the fighting bullfish's body like a rainstorm, smashing the fighting bullfish's head into mush. What happened? Why isn't the fighting bullfish resisting anymore? Is it trying to die? Just as he was feeling puzzled, he saw this fighting bullfish actually move. Fuck, was it a moving corpse? Sherdu got a fright, and then his eyes widened. This fighting bullfish did not move by itself, but was lifted up by a person. That was a young man, and he cracked a smile at him. Brother, do you want Sun Soul Stones? Sherdu would never be able to forget this scene. When he thought back on it afterwards, he always felt that he was no different from an idiot at that time. He only knew how to stare blankly at this person in front of him, completely at a loss for what to say. Oh, don't. Then I'll ask someone else. Ling Han casually tossed the fighting bullfish to one side. This was only a sea creature at the peak stage of the fourth severance, and the Sun Soul Stones that it nurtured were completely beneath his notice. Using it to fuse with them would be a waste of time. Wait. Sherdu did not know why he had opened his mouth either. He asked with a sliver of hope, "Do you have Sun Soul Stones for sale? What quality are they?" Ling Han cracked a smile and asked, "What price can you afford?" He waved his right hand, and a pile of Sun Soul Stones suddenly appeared in front of him. Starting from green, there were all the way to indigo. Sherdu's eyes immediately widened. A blue Sun Soul Stone was his ultimate goal, but his opponent had actually taken out an indigo Sun Soul Stone, causing his little heart to beat wildly. His first reaction was to snatch it, but his heart trembled. It was extremely difficult for him to obtain yellow Sun Soul Stones, but the other could hunt indigo-level sea creatures. What kind of strength was this? Snatching it was an act of seeking death. He swallowed, suppressed his greed, and said, "I want to buy this indigo one. How many star stones do I need?" "Not much, just 10 million will do." Ling Han smiled and said, "Also, if star stones are not enough, you are allowed to use godly metal and pseudo-divine metal to make up for it. As long as I am satisfied, this Sun Soul Stone is yours." "I'll look for it," Sherdu said hurriedly. 10 million star stones was naturally a huge sum, but as long as he was alive, he would definitely be able to earn this sum of money. However, if he missed out on indigo Sun Soul Stones, then there would definitely not be a next time. He was presently a king tier, and if he could break through with indigo Sun Soul Stones, This could not possibly allow him to advance into the ranks of Emperor tiers, but it would be enough to increase his ranking among King tiers by a large margin. Rummaging through his drawers, Sherdu only managed to gather a little over 6 million star stones. Adding in godly metal, pseudo-divine metal, some alchemical pills, and pseudo-celestial medicines, that was only worth about 8 million. He looked pitifully at Ling Han, his eyes filled with little stars as he yearned. Ling Han sighed and said, "Forget it, I'll sell it to you at a low price." Thank you, thank you." Sherdu hurriedly expressed his thanks. He felt that Ling Han was the best person in the world. Ling Han did not mind. In any case, he could not bring the Sun Soul Stone out, and letting it rot in his hands would be a waste. Being able to sell it was a good thing. He collected all of Sherdu's belongings, and then stood up and left with the 3 women. A few days later, they encountered another person. This time, it was not just one person, but a small team of 7, and they were currently surrounding and killing a 4th Severance Peak stage sea creature. Ling Han broke into a grin. This time he could sell a little more. He strode over and directly killed that sea creature. Then he said, "Everyone, do you want Sun Soul Stones?" Instantly, everyone was dumbstruck. They only knew how to stare dumbly at this person in front of them, as if they had encountered the most inconceivable thing in the world. "Yes," someone said. Ling Han nodded, smiled, and said, "A smart choice." "Hey, you don't even know who he is, so how dare you talk to him?" A companion rebuked in a low voice. "Are you stupid? That is Ling Han. The Ling Han who had once fought to a tie with the strange. What, he is Ling Han?" With these words, the 7 of them all looked at Ling Han with reverent eyes, as if they were looking up to a supreme god. Ling Han did not mind. With a wave of his right hand, he scattered out a great number of Sun Soul Stones and said, "Everyone feel free to choose. I guarantee that every Sun Soul Stone is genuine, and I will not cheat anyone." Instantly, the eyes of the group of 7 widened, and they could no longer shift their gazes away from those Sun Soul Stones. Chapter 2009. He really didn't expect that these 7 people were all tycoons despite their mediocre strength. Everyone bought an indigo Sun Soul Stone, and threw out 10 million star stones without the slightest bit of heartache. This made even Ling Han doubt himself. Was he really an alchemist? It seemed like he was very poor. He and the 3 women continued forward. Very quickly, a legend began to circulate in this region of the sea. When you were defenseless, someone would quietly appear and ask if you wanted to buy fur. No Sun Soul Stones. Ling Han spent more than 100 years in the Sun Soul Sea. He sold all of his Sun Soul Stones, and after so many years, he completely stabilized his realm, and his battle prowess became more and more terrifying. Time to go back. Ling Han and the others floated to the surface of the sea, looking for a way back. At this time, they could see that many people had also floated to the surface of the water, and like Ling Han and the others, they were looking for a way back. Breaking through to the dividing soul tier only required a month's time. Thus, most people would only attempt to break through to the dividing soul tier at the last moment. The time before that would be spent on collecting Sun Soul Stones, trying to obtain the highest quality Sun Soul Stones. Now that it was nearing the return date, it was only natural that most of the people had begun to return. The remaining people would soon return as well, probably within a month or 2. Ling Han! An earth-shattering roar rang out. Ling Han stopped and looked back, only to see Ma Tongguang rapidly approaching. Behind him was Lu Xianming, who was a few hundred meters behind. Both of them had broken through to the dividing soul realm. Originally, Lu Xianming couldn't compare to Ma Tongguang at all, but once he broke through to the dividing soul tier, the gap between the arch tier and king tier had shrunk significantly. At the very least, Lu Xianming would no longer be left behind by Ma Tongguang. "Oh, it's you 2 scumbags," Ling Han said casually. Dang, Ma Tongguang's anger immediately soared. He had broken through to the dividing soul realm, moreover, he had broken through with the help of an indigo Sun Soul Stone. This was extremely extraordinary. Therefore, he thought highly of himself, and believed that very few people could compare to him. Ling Han had indeed been stronger than him when he had been in the 5th Severance, But he had broken through with the indigo sun soul stone. So he had definitely left Ling Han in the dust. At this time, he no longer had the interest to feign civility with Ling Han, and directly shed all pretense of cordiality. "You arrogant scum die." Ma Tongguang's figure shot out, his right hand open. Xiao xiao xiao. Instantly countless immortal chains shot out towards Ling Han. Behind him, Lu Xianming revealed a sinister smile. He had witnessed Ma Tongguang's breakthrough with his own eyes, and he knew how powerful Ma Tongguang was. He could only worship and look up to him. Now that Ma Tongguang had attacked in anger, he could definitely kill Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head. When Ma Tongguang had been at the fifth severance, he had already been inferior to him. And now he had broken through to the dividing soul tier, with the help of the perfect purple sun soul stone. Not only had the gap between him and Ma Tongguang not shrunk, it had instead widened. He smiled faintly and casually pulled. Ma Tongguang was instantly slapped, and the immortal chains of laws that filled the sky were all shattered by that one strike, turning into fine fragments of the power of laws, and then returning to the world. What? Ma Tongguang was in a daze. His mind was filled with disbelief. He was actually still not a match for Ling Han. How could this be? He had broken through with the indigo sun soul stone. For this, he had even used a secret treasure that could deal heavy damage to even Earth Soul tier level sea creatures. At the risk of almost exhausting this secret treasure, he had only obtained 200 blue-colored sun soul stones, and then fused and refined them into an indigo sun soul stone. Could it be that Ling Han also had such a secret treasure? "Hey brother Lu, you've also broken through to the dividing soul tier?" "Of course." "Oh right, what kind of sun soul stone did you use to break through?" "I'm afraid I'll scare you if I tell you indigo." "What, you're indigo too?" "You're indigo too." In the distance, the conversation between two people traveled over, causing Ma Tongguang to turn his head numbly. When he saw these two people, his mouth involuntarily gaped into a circle. That was because these two people could barely be counted as king tiers. He had seen them before, and with his memory, he naturally had a photographic memory. A mere king tier actually broke through with an indigo sun soul stone? Then what was he so awesome about? A young Master Ling. Those two people had also seen Ling Han, and they hurriedly ran over to him, expressing their thanks repeatedly. "Young Master Ling, thank you so much. If you hadn't sold us the indigo sun soul stone, we would at most have broken through with the green sun soul stone. I will definitely remember this kindness in my heart. In the future, if I have any errands to run, I will definitely not shirk." After these two people expressed their endless gratitude, they finally left. The corner of Ma Tongguang's mouth twitched. What? These two people's indigo sun soul stones were actually sold to them by Ling Han? Then Ling Han must have also used indigo sun soul stones to break through. Otherwise, how could he possibly have extra sun soul stones to sell? If he said that he used green and blue sun soul stones to break through, but sold better sun soul stones to others, wouldn't that be stupid? "Grandmaster Ling." Another person rushed over and bowed towards Ling Han. "Many thanks for Grandmaster's great kindness, allowing me to use indigo sun soul stones to break through." Immediately after, another person came, and another person came, and another person came. Ma Tongguang was already numb. In his opinion, obtaining indigo sun soul stones was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. For a monarch tier as strong as he was, he still needed to borrow the secret treasures of the Western Celestial Realm to obtain them. So what right did the trash here have to do it? Lu Xianming was also dumbfounded. He had also benefited greatly from following Ma Tongguang. After the other hunted down and obtained the green sun soul stones, he didn't even deign to pick them up, and just placed them in his pocket. Thus, he used 200 green sun soul stones to synthesize indigo, and thus broke through to the dividing soul tier. He thought that he had latched onto a thick thigh, but now? He quietly pulled someone over and asked, and then almost fainted. Only a mere 10 million star stones? He was a 2-star alchemist, and more so a former holy son of Alchemy City. His net worth was definitely in the hundreds of millions, and taking out 10 million star stones was a small matter. But now, because he had followed the wrong person, he would regret it for the rest of his life. He hated so much. Why did Ling Han have to oppose him? It's fine that you obtained so many indigo sun soul stones. But why did you have to take them out? Everyone broke through with indigo sun soul stones. So what sense of superiority could you have? Lu Xianming couldn't understand. How could there be such a person? He was practically a freak. Yet he didn't know that Ling Han had actually broken through with a purple sun soul stone. However, even if Ling Han had broken through with an indigo sun soul stone, he didn't care, because he was filled with confidence in himself. Everyone's conditions were the same, so he would definitely be stronger. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "The two of you have been jumping around like clowns for so long, so it's time to send you on your way." He didn't wait for Ma Tongguang to speak, and his figure had already charged out. He was like a dragon emerging from the sea, soaring through the sky. Delusion. Ma Tongguang gritted his teeth and drew out a scroll. He suddenly opened it and saw that the majority of the scroll was blank, and only the last paragraph had a few characters. It was unclear what was written, but there was a domineering aura that could suppress the heavens. This was a treasure bestowed by a celestial king, but a celestial king was too strong, and a scroll made of this kind of material definitely wouldn't be able to bear the power of a celestial king. Thus, its might was greatly reduced. Even so, it could still easily wipe out the life of an Earth Soul elite. Die! Ma Tongguang shook the scroll forcefully, and the remaining 7 characters instantly lit up. Cell phone reading was even more refreshing. Chapter 2010. A Beautiful Romance. Wung. The characters on the scroll glowed brightly. After reaching their peak, Xiao, these characters actually flew out of the scroll and turned into human figures. They were all 9 meters tall, and their bodies exuded a blazing white light. The 7 characters turned into 7 warriors, all of them majestic and awe-inspiring. Originally, Ma Tongguang only used 1 character at a time, but now that he deeply understood how powerful Ling Han was, he directly activated all 7 Celestial King characters. His goal was simple: kill Ling Han, and he didn't want any accidents to occur. And a bit interesting. Ling Han stepped out. His figure trembled, and a figure walked out from his body. It was the 9 Heavens Flames subsoul. Kill him. Ma Tongguang pointed at Ling Han. He originally wanted to wait until Ling Han went to the Western Celestial Realm before killing Ling Han, but now he was burning with fury, and didn't want to wait a moment longer. Die. 7 light warriors surrounded Ling Han. Though they were all humanoid, it was impossible to tell what they looked like, and their faces were all blurred. Boom! The light warriors moved at the same time, suppressing towards Ling Han. 2 Ling Hans attacked at the same time. Pung. The battle instantly became incredibly intense. What was the difference between breaking through with different Sun Soul stones? If it was purple, then the subsoul could reach the full battle prowess of the main body, and if it was indigo, then only 90%, and so on. In the end, the subsoul would still return to the main body when breaking through to the Immortal Palace tier. Thus, the stronger the subsoul, the stronger the battle prowess when breaking through to the Immortal Palace tier. On the other hand, the higher the quality of the Sun Soul stone, the stronger the strength in the Yang Soul tier. It was like 2 rivers of the same length, but one was wide and one was narrow. Which one had more water in it? 2 Ling Han's battle prowess were the same, and their minds were connected. If not for the fact that one had a black tower, there would be no difference between the main body and the subsoul. Pung! 2 Ling Hans against 7 light figures, the scene incredibly intense. Who has the upper hand? Someone asked in the distance. I'm not sure. The person beside him shook his head. Indeed, no one knew. The strength of Ling Han and the Light Shadow Warrior had reached the initial Heavenly Soul stage, and was far above that of an ordinary dividing soul. The Empress and Hunyeo, however, smiled. They obviously knew that Ling Han and the Light Shadow Warrior had actually fought to a draw. However, Ling Han was a true martial artist, and his strength was endless. On the other hand, the Light Shadow Warrior was formed from the Celestial King characters. So how long could it last? Ling Han would definitely win this battle. After all, Ma Tongguang was an emperor. He was shocked that the Light Shadow Warrior wasn't able to suppress Ling Han. That was the technique of a Celestial King, and it could easily suppress an Earth Soul stage expert. Furthermore, Ling Han had just advanced to the Dividing Soul stage. Even if he was of Arch, and could be invincible against those 2 stages above him, it was still 7 against 2. No matter how one looked at it, Ling Han would definitely lose. He was very clear that this Celestial King tier technique could only last for 2 hours. If he couldn't kill Ling Han within 2 hours, then he wouldn't have another chance. Gritting his teeth, Ma Tongguang also summoned his clone and attacked Ling Han. Even if he wasn't as strong as Ling Han, he was still a mighty Arch, and his strength couldn't be underestimated. Boom! The 9 heavens flame split Soul's whole body burned with blazing flames. After obtaining independence, the 9 heavens flame could also completely release its own power. This was the difference between it and Ling Han's main body, and it could be called the ultimate technique of the split soul. The blazing flames burned heaven and earth, and the 9 heavens flame split soul displayed great might, blocking the 7 great light shadow warriors by himself. Ling Han took the opportunity to attack Ma Tongguang. There was no meaning in tangling with the 7 light shadow warriors. Killing Ma Tongguang was the main point. Pung 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 pung. Without the restraints of the light shadow warriors, how could Ma Tongguang possibly be a match for Ling Han? He was being suppressed, and fresh blood continuously splattered from his body. It was likely that he would be killed within 100 moves. Protect me. Ma Tongguang's heart trembled, and he didn't dare to exchange blows with Ling Han anymore. They were both Thearchs, but the gap between them was actually so great. The 7 great light shadow warriors immediately attacked Ling Han, clearing a path for Ma Tongguang to escape. As expected, under the frenzied attacks of the 7 great light shadow warriors, Ling Han was trapped, and he could no longer attack Ma Tongguang. This caused Ma Tongguang to reveal a hint of joy, and he hurriedly turned around and fled. As he fled, a strong sense of humiliation welled up in him. As a mighty Arch, even after using a Celestial King tier secret treasure, he could only flee in a sorry state. This was a great humiliation that he had never experienced before. When he reached the Western Celestial Realm, he would definitely kill Ling Han and avenge this grudge. Ling Han only smiled faintly. He had indeed been trapped. But Ma Tongguang had also forgotten one thing, and that was that he was no longer a 5th Severance, but rather a Dividing Soul tier elite. This meant that he still had a split soul. Xiao, the split soul of the 9 heavens flame, charged out. The 7 great light shadow warriors were all blocking Ling Han with all their strength, so they naturally couldn't block the split soul of the 9 heavens flame. This Ling Han charged out with an unstoppable momentum, a punch blasting towards Ma Tongguang's back. No! Ma Tongguang exclaimed in shock, and hurriedly turned around to block, but he was only focused on escaping, so how could he possibly turn around in time? Pung! A punch blasted out, and flames soared into the skies. A fist of the split soul of the 9 heavens flame had already pierced through Ma Tongguang's chest. Ma Tongguang's eyes were dazed, and he lowered his head slightly to look at his chest, an expression of disbelief on his face. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but when his head tilted, he was already dead. How terrifying was the destructive power of the 9 heavens flame. How could he still be alive after his heart had been directly blasted apart? Lu Xianming couldn't help but feel like his heart was about to shatter. That was a representative of the Western Celestial Realm, but Ling Han still mercilessly blasted him to death. In comparison, what was he? A 2-star alchemist, a former holy son. How could he compare to Ma Tongguang? Just at this moment, the 7 light shadow warriors flashed and suddenly dissipated. Time was up. Ling Han strode towards Lu Xianming, his gaze cold. Lu Xianming, you have some achievements in alchemy, and I have also turned a blind eye to some of your little tricks. But you keep provoking me again and again. This is seeking your own death. No, you can't kill me. I'm also a member of Alchemy City. Lu Xianming shouted. This is called cleaning house. Ling Han shot out a punch. Pung! Lu Xianming was directly blasted apart, turning into a rain of blood. He clapped his hands, a relaxed expression on his face. Let's go, this place isn't fun at all, Hunyo urged. Ling Han nodded, and the 4 of them continued to advance. After killing the envoy of the Western Celestial Realm, Can we deal with it? The Empress asked. We'll deal with it as it comes. Who asked that guy to make a move against me time and time again? And even more so to target you guys, Ling Han said with great displeasure. The Empress nodded and did not say anything else. She was an incredibly proud person and thought that everyone in the world should worship her. Then, so what if Ling Han killed an insignificant person? Niu will protect Ling Han. Niu held onto one of Ling Han's arms. Quite affectionate. A laugh rang out behind Ling Han and the others. Ling Han's fighting spirit instantly blazed. He slowly turned around and enunciated word by word, Ji Wuming. Chapter 2012. Ling Han, you're so awesome. Niu was the first to jump over and lay on Ling Han's back, waving her small hands continuously. The Empress also snuggled over, her face full of emotion. From the moment Ji Wuming appeared, he was like an insurmountable mountain. Even these super monarchs could only look up to him. But now Ling Han actually blocked Ji Wuming by himself. How could this not make them incredibly excited? I want. The Empress moved closer to Ling Han's ear and softly said 2 words. A delicate fragrance wafted over Ling Han's neck, warm and hot. Ling Han instantly shivered. The Empress in front of him was like a pool of spring water, indescribably enchanting. Niu also wants. Niu was unwilling to be taken advantage of, and her small hands groped all over Ling Han's chest. Nonsense. Ling Han hurriedly swept out with his large hand, drawing the 3 girls into the Black Tower. He threw Niu and bewitching Maiden Ro to one side, and flew away with the Empress in his arms. Damn Ling Han! Damn Ling Han! Niu shouted loudly in anger. Why was this damn guy always unwilling to have children with her? Bewitching Maiden Ro's eyes were also seductive. She had long since been conquered by Ling Han, and the moment she thought of the scene of Ling Han and the Empress entwined, she couldn't help but blush. She felt her body heat up, as if something was about to surge out from within. Damn foe! She crossed her legs, her gaze extremely resentful, making even a golem's heart beat faster when he saw it. A day later, Ling Han finally brought the 3 girls out of the Black Tower and continued on their way. The Empress's face was glowing from being nourished, becoming even more beautiful, and Ling Han was also refreshed. In the previous few hundred years, they had been searching for Sun Soul Stones, and had not thought of that at all. Bad Ling Han, Niu hates you, Niu said in a fit of pique. Ling Han comforted her, and took out a few more pieces of barbecued meat. As the fragrance assailed their noses, Niu immediately drooled, throwing the matter of jealousy out the window. Another month later, they finally returned to the entrance, and followed the passageway upwards. Hua, the water splashed, and the 4 of them emerged from the water. The long-awaited sunlight shone down, and the sky was clear and bright. The Sun Soul Sea was undergoing intense changes. The rainbow light had long since turned white, and now, this white light was constantly shaking, as if it would shatter at any moment. Once the rainbow shattered, it meant that the Sun Soul Sea was closed, and the next time would be 100 million years later. Thus, those who had not come out at that time would forever remain in the Sun Soul Sea. After 17 days, the white light also disappeared. Ling Han did some calculations. There had been a total of 752 people when they had first arrived, and only 421 people had returned. Among them, 74 had broken through to the dividing soul tier, while the remaining people had failed to break through. They could only wait for the next time. Of those who came to the Sun Soul Sea, only a few were tormented by the immortal tribulation and had to break through. Otherwise, their longevity would be severed. Everyone else was confident enough to come and take the risk. However, out of more than 700 people, only less than 100 had successfully broken through. It could be seen how difficult it was to break through to the dividing soul tier. The warship activated and returned to Alchemy City. Niu ran over to tell Ling Han that in these 700 years, there had been celestial king tier sects that had come to capture Ling Han. And it was the 6 monarch tiers that Ling Han had killed in the 3 Flowers Valley that had caused this disaster. How could the forces behind them let it go so easily? Monarch tier. Even celestial king tier forces would find it difficult to nurture them. At the very least, they would need to be at the 5th tier of heaven or above. Now that he had been killed, the immortal king naturally had to ask about it. However, everyone was driven back by LV Herong. She did not show herself all this while, but remained nearby to protect Hunyeo, and in passing, helped Ling Han deal with some small troubles. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder no celestial king tier forces had come to make trouble for him all this while. So it turned out that they had all been stopped by Lu Herong. Let's return to Alchemy City first, then go to the Western Celestial region. After spending more than a year's time, they finally returned to Alchemy City. After dealing with some miscellaneous matters, Ling Han bade farewell to Grandmaster Zicheng, and then led the 4 women, as well as Shirlei and Shiryu, towards the seas of the Eastern Celestial Realm. Standing at the prow of the ship, Ling Han was slightly rueful. Originally, he should have gone to the Western Celestial Realm almost 1,000 years ago, but because of the battle between 2 ascending origin tiers, he was unwittingly affected. In the end, he went to Alchemy City, and various things happened. Now he was finally going to head to the Western Celestial Realm again. Furthermore, with a 4th Heaven Celestial King keeping watch this time, success should be in the bag, right? Xiao. LV Hairong's figure flashed, and finally appeared on the warship. Once we enter the boundless seas, all of you better behave yourselves, she said solemnly. Senior, you are a 4th Heaven Celestial King? Ling Han was surprised. Even 4th Heaven Celestial Kings could not move freely in the boundless seas? LV Herong scoffed and said, if you want to die you can try. Ugly, don't talk to Neo's Ling Han like that. Hunyeo jumped up first. LV Herong couldn't help but be speechless. Hunyeo was so devoted to this man that she couldn't do anything about it. There are many primitive beings in the boundless seas, Hunyeo explained to Ling Han. When heaven and earth were first born, the first batch of living beings all became celestial kings, but not all living beings' intelligence was developed. In the boundless seas there are many powerful beings. They are like the lowest level wild beasts, and the only meaning of their life is to survive. If you accidentally barge into their territory, that would be very bad. But Neo likes it. The little girl giggled, looking as if she wanted the whole world to be in chaos. Ling Han nodded. The evolution of the Eastern and Western Celestial Realms was faster, and most of the beings had developed their intelligence, but the beings in the seas were slower, still muddle-headed. Close to 4 months later, the warship arrived at the end of the Eastern Celestial Realm. Ahead was the boundless seas, and after crossing over, it was the Western Celestial Realm, another world with a higher level of martial art and alchemy. In that world, there were Ling Han's parents, his lovers, and his son. Ling Han couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion. It was fine if he didn't think about it, but when he thought about it, he was incredibly excited. If his son walked at the pace of a normal person, there should be many generations of children and grandchildren now, right? When he thought that he was going to be a grandfather, or even a great-grandfather, Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He really wasn't prepared for this. Let's go. LV Herong waved her hand, and the warship sped towards the seas. The power of a celestial king was indescribably strong. Ling Han and the women all stood at the bow, admiring the scenery along the way. There was no day and night in the celestial realm. If a sun and a moon appeared, they were usually the sun and moon refined by ascending origin tier, or above with supreme means. And in the boundless seas, there naturally wasn't any great elite that had nothing better to do, and would refine a sun and moon here. Thus this was a primitive place. However, there were still stars in the celestial realm. Innumerable stars decorated the sky, and would shine day and night. This boundless seas naturally couldn't be dark either. It was just that it couldn't be considered bright. It was as if the scenery between heaven and earth would never change. Overhead was a dense sky full of stars, and below was a boundless sea. Boom! Suddenly, a giant hand appeared out of thin air, and slapped down towards the warship. Chapter 2013. A large hand appeared out of nowhere, yet it exuded boundless might, its ferocious might towering into the sky. 7 Clouds King. Lu Herong rebuked angrily, her bare hand reaching towards the sky. She was a celestial king, and could easily use supreme mystical powers. Her bare hand was entwined with endless light of great Tao, and she slapped towards the large hand. Hong! The two large hands collided, and instantly cracks appeared. The light of great Tao trembled and spread to the surface of the sea, causing a tsunami that was at least 3,000 meters high, shooting out in all directions. Despicable, Lu Herong rebuked again. Gaga, this is called cutting the weeds by the roots. With a strange laugh, the large hand condensed again and slapped over. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Lu Herong greeted it with a palm, unafraid. Hong. The two's strength was similar, and after this strike, the hands that both sides struck out once again collapsed, neither being able to suppress the other. But at this moment, another large hand appeared, slapping toward him from the side. Ink Poison King. This time, Lu Herong revealed a shocked expression. The other actually sent out two celestial kings to snipe her, or more accurately, to snipe Hunyao. When they left the rock palace, the great elder had intentionally used a secret technique to conceal the heavenly secrets, making it impossible to deduce their whereabouts. However, the other party was lying in ambush on the sea, clearly grasping their whereabouts. Could there be a traitor in the rock palace? This caused her to feel a chill all over. Pung! She hadn't even finished her thought when a palm slapped over from behind. Though she blocked it, she was unprepared, and it was a pincer attack from two great celestial kings. So how could she completely block it? With a loud sound, the warship instantly disintegrated, and Ling Han and the others were enveloped in a halo of light, which was the protection Lu Herong had given them. She waved her hand again, and xiao, Ling Han and the others instantly disappeared. And they teleported away. A voice came from the clouds. Old Mo, go chase after those people, and be sure to kill Yun's reincarnation. Understood, another person answered. And then there was no more sound. Don't even think about it. Lu Herong hurriedly went to intercept. See, Heavenly King, your opponent is me. Boom. A huge hand slammed down, blocking LV Herong. Lu Herong was anxious. Though Hunyao had many life-saving techniques, it was absolutely impossible for her to escape from the hands of a celestial king. Her only hope now was Ling Han. He was the successor of that lord. Maybe it was possible. Xiao. Ling Han's group of 5 fell from the sky, landing on the boundless ocean below. Ling Han hurriedly stretched out his hand and grabbed the 4 women. Fun. Hunyao laughed loudly, not the slightest bit surprised. This girl's nerves were really thick. Ling Han furrowed his brows. This time, it was really the fish in the moat that caught fire when the city gate caught fire. Although the rock palace was powerful, their enemies weren't weak either. They were openly attacking in the boundless sea realm. So what if there was a celestial king guarding them? They had dispatched 2. One immortal king is enough to restrain Senior Lu. But what if another immortal king catches up to us? Ling Han muttered. Then we're dead for sure, the Empress said. No matter how confident they were, facing a celestial king, there was absolutely no possibility of survival. Enter the Black Tower. Ling Han waved his hand again, drawing everyone into the Black Tower. At this time, even a low-level celestial king couldn't catch them. A mustard seed fell from the sky, falling into the seawater, and drifting with the waves. Wang's celestial light shone, and a man silently appeared. His figure couldn't be considered tall, but merely standing in the void. It was like a mountain that would never crumble, and one could only look up to him. Ink Poison King. Strange, according to the ripples of space, those 5 people have indeed appeared here. The Ink Poison King stretched out a hand, lightly stroking it. He was capturing the ripples of regulations of space. I also sensed the auras of 5 people, but they suddenly disappeared, as if they don't exist in this heaven and earth. Strange. He began to search in the surroundings, and the more he looked, the more surprised he was because it was as if Ling Han and the others had really disappeared into thin air. Boom, the sea rippled, and a massive flood dragon appeared, riding the wind and breaking through the waves. We actually entered the territory of a hell flood dragon. The Ink Poison King frowned. There's no benefit in fighting, so it's better to retreat first. If these 5 people are really nearby, Then I don't even need to act. And they'll die at the hands of this hell-flood dragon. He was incredibly decisive, and directly turned to leave. In the distance, the flood dragon swam over, roaring angrily at the sky. Hong hong hong, multiple stars fell from the sky. The might of a celestial king was too terrifying, and a single roar could cause stars to fall. After a long time, the flood dragon finally entered the sea, and the sea became calm again. Ling Han and the others stayed in the Black Tower, allowing the waves to push them. This shouldn't be my fault this time, right? Ling Han said with a smile. He had his own halo of trouble, and could always inadvertently cause trouble. But this time obviously had nothing to do with him. That's not for sure, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden said with a smile. If I wasn't with my husband, Hunyo might not have encountered a sneak attack. That's right. Hunyo nodded hurriedly. Ling Han laughed loudly and asked, Nyo, which clan has your rock palace become enemies with? One called the Four Seas Palace. Their palace master is a psychopath, and always wants to destroy our rock palace, causing Nyo to also be affected, Hunyo said angrily. Ling Han and the others listened to Hunyo's detailed explanation, and couldn't help but be moved. The Four Seas Palace was very powerful, and the palace master was a woman called Shang Jiwei, who wholeheartedly wanted to destroy the rock palace. And this woman was a ninth heaven celestial king, and her strength was one of the best in the whole celestial realm. If it wasn't for the fact that the rock palace still had a great elder struggling at death's door, and forcibly holding on, this powerful force would have long been flattened. Even now, the days of the rock palace weren't good. Most people were holed up, and once they left the territory of the rock palace, they could face a head-on attack, causing millions of years of bitter cultivation to go up in smoke. When Nyo becomes a ninth heaven celestial king, I'll definitely beat that psychopaths, but no, burst her ass, Hunyo said angrily. Ling Han couldn't help sweating. The little girl had definitely been led astray by him. In the Black Tower, they drifted along with the current. At least a month's time had passed, but they still did not dare to leave the Black Tower. There was an immortal king guarding them outside. What was a mere month of drifting? It wasn't safe at all. They did not remain idle, either, and were cultivating inside the Black Tower. They just so happened to have opened the upper limit of their cultivation level, so they were not afraid of wasting time. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. They had already spent 100 years in the Black Tower, and furthermore, they had also used the time acceleration of the Black Tower and comprehended Tao under the reincarnation tree. For example, Ling Han, the Empress, and Hunyo had all advanced their cultivation to the middle stage of the Yang Soul tier. Bewitching Maiden Ro was slightly weaker, but she was also close to the middle stage of Yang Soul. It's about time to go out. They discussed for a while, and decided that they couldn't stay in the Black Tower forever. Ling Han's figure flashed, exiting the Black Tower. Instantly, a terrifying chi rolled out, and a giant hand reached out with the speed of a clap of thunder. Fuck, that immortal king is still waiting. Chapter 2014. Ling Han cursed in his mind, and hurriedly hid inside the Black Tower. Woo, he grunted. He had entered the Black Tower, but he was still swept by the aura of the Celestial King, breaking at least 90% of the bones in his body, and it was the kind of shattering fracture. It was too terrifying. The attack of the Celestial King had not reached him at all, and merely swept by the aura, and the physique that Ling Han was so proud of completely collapsed. This was a Celestial King, the pinnacle of techniques, and every movement represented the great Tao of heaven and earth. Ling Han, the Empress and the others hurriedly gathered around. Ling Han exhaled, gritted his teeth and said, "It's fine, I won't die." "You're still saying it's fine, but your dick is already rotten." Hunyo's expression was full of sadness. "Woo woo woo, damn Ling Han. You haven't made babies with Nyo yet." "Fuck, where are your eyes looking at?" Ling Han hurriedly channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid. Usually, after channeling this drop of indestructible true fluid, his injuries should immediately heal in a very short period of time. But now they did not. Though he had only been swept by the aura of the Celestial King for a moment, there was still the Celestial King's martial art intent within it. If it was not erased, even the indestructible true fluid would be helpless. After all, the difference in cultivation level between the two sides was too great. What kind of celestial king is this, actually hiding a few dividing soul tier elites? Ling Han complained. It could only be said that the patience of celestial kings was really too good. They had lived for who knew how many epochs, so for them. So what if they waited for 100 years, 1,000 years, or even 1,000,000 years? Not to say that it would pass in the blink of an eye, but no matter what, it was still a small matter. In comparison, the patience of Ling Han and the others was too poor. I'll heal my injuries first. Ling Han sat at the side and channeled the power of the Black Tower, attempting to erase the celestial king's intent in his body. This was too difficult. What was a celestial king? That was an existence that stood at the peak of the great Tao. Even if Ling Han had the Black Tower, wanting to erase the celestial king's intent was still as difficult as ascending to the heavens. He ceaselessly fought against this immortal king will, and a tug of war was carried out within his body. Every step he took was extremely difficult. If it weren't for the fact that he was inside the Black Tower, and if it weren't for the fact that he had cultivated the indestructible heavens scroll, which allowed him to suppress celestial kings in terms of cultivation level, it would have been completely impossible for him to possibly dispel the celestial king's will. He would only be slowly eroded by the celestial king's will. If it wasn't so overbearing, what qualifications did an immortal king have to be called an immortal king to stand at the peak of all Daos? Ling Han forgot about everything else. He was just fighting against the immortal king's will. 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 100 years, time flew by, and 100,000 years had passed inside the Black Tower. Ling Han finally gained the upper hand. It was not that he had won the battle, but that he had gained the upper hand. He finally knew how to deal with this celestial king's will. And what surprised him even more was that through such a battle of attrition, his application of the regulations had become even more meticulous and skilled. He had a feeling that his current battle prowess was definitely much stronger than it was 100 years ago. This was firstly, because his cultivation level had increased, and secondly, because his grasp of regulations had reached the level of meticulousness. Only in this way could he see through the profound mysteries of the celestial king's will and banish it. Of course, this was only a wisp of the celestial king's aura. If he was really struck, then no matter how detailed his grasp of regulations was, it would be completely useless. He continued to fight against this will. Time passed quickly. 100 years, 200 years, 500 years. Ling Han finally opened his eyes again. A whole 500,000 years had passed inside the Black Tower. The celestial king's will had finally completely dissipated. It was really troublesome. A whole 600 years. And the Black Tower's time was even 600,000 years. And only then did he manage to banish a strand of martial arts will. Ling Han, are you alright? Hunyao and the other 3 girls all gathered around. Ling Han nodded and said, I'm fine. Moreover, it can be considered a blessing in disguise. His cultivation level had already reached the late stage of the Yang Soul tier. This was a real improvement, and the invisible improvement was his use of regulations. The present him was a little like Ji Wuming. They were clearly at the same cultivation level, but he could make others despair. I wonder if that annoying guy has left, Hunyao said with a pout. Perhaps he hasn't left, but we've encountered a few great waves in these few hundred years, so he should have already left that area. Even the area that the divine sense of a celestial king can cover is limited. We should be out of this area. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, making preparations to immediately flee inside. But after waiting for a long time, the sea was calm and tranquil. There was no one attacking at all. Wang, a large ship suddenly appeared in the distance, quickly sailing in his direction. Ling Han focused his eyes and saw a flag stuck on the large ship. On it was a vivid and lifelike eagle fluttering in the wind. This was a merchant ship. The boundless seas were not the Dead Sea. Instead, merchant ships frequently came and went. Though it was very dangerous, the profits were also very high. In the boundless seas, there was basically no news of pirates appearing. The danger mostly came from the ship itself. There were too many powerful beings here that could even make a celestial king frown. Thus, merchant ships that dared to do business in the boundless seas definitely had elites overseeing them. Young man, come on up. The large ship did not stop when it passed, and instead threw a rope over, which just happened to be a foot in front of Ling Han. Ling Han reached out and grabbed, and then pulled hard. His whole body flew up, and he landed steadily on the deck. Was your merchant ship attacked by sea kings? A large man stood on the deck, holding the end of the rope in his hand. In the boundless seas, those powerful celestial beasts that reached the level of celestial king were called sea kings. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, more or less. 2 celestial kings could also be counted as sea kings, right? If the Black Poison Immortal King and the 7 Clouds Celestial King knew, they would definitely be seething with anger. To actually compare them to ferocious beasts of the sea without intelligence, wasn't this mocking them? We're going to the Western Celestial Realm. If you're also going, then I'll let you hitch a ride. However, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. You have to activate the formation every day and use it as your transportation fee, the large man said. All right. Ling Han agreed. The large man arranged a room for him, and Ling Han would go to the bottom of the large ship every day and activate the formation with the other sailors, adding power to the ship. In a few days, Ling Han also became familiar with the sailors. This merchant ship belonged to the Qing clan, and the Qing clan was an ascending origin tier force. The Qing clan had a total of 11 large merchant ships, and there was an ascending origin tier great elite on each ship. As long as they did not encounter sea kings, they would basically be fine. The large man that had previously let Ling Han board the ship was called Qin Wei, and he was an immortal palace tier elite of the Qin clan. He had a straightforward personality, and most liked to make friends. If it were not so, he would not have meddled in other people's business and pulled Ling Han back. This day, Ling Han was resting in the cabin of the ship. The environment here was quite bad, so he did not let the 4 women, Shirley, and Shiryu out. With a boom, the ship shook violently. What happened? Have we been attacked again? Pung pung pung. The ship shook continuously, and the tremors became stronger and stronger. Not good, we've encountered a huge tsunami, someone exclaimed. Chapter 2016. The island didn't seem far, but in reality, it was extremely far. After they rode for almost an hour, the island was still in sight, but it grew bigger and bigger from a small black dot. Firstly, the sea limited their speed, and secondly, the island was indeed very far from them. But as they got closer and closer to the island, even those with weaker cultivation could see the buildings on the island clearly. This island isn't on the sea map, Qin Wei said resolutely. Forces that did business on the sea would draw sea maps. If they encountered an unavoidable natural disaster like this, they would swim to the nearest island and wait for rescue or save themselves. And this had indeed saved their lives many times. To these forces, the more detailed and accurate the sea map was, the more it could save lives at the crucial moment. Though they encountered a natural disaster this time, and suffered huge losses, if they could perfect the Qing clan's sea map, they could recover some of the losses. The unknown island coordinates could be taken out and sold. Of course, it was only used as a rescue point and a place to stay. I heard that cultivators on the sea are very cruel and have the habit of eating human flesh, someone suddenly said, shivering. Hey, where did this rumor come from? Someone immediately expressed disdain. This isn't completely false. The creatures in the sea haven't developed intelligence, so why are the cultivators on the island enlightened? Someone retorted. Don't try to disturb our morale. Qin Wei humphed. Among the 34 people, he was the only one in the Immortal Palace tier, so he naturally had the absolute right to speak. Once he said this, no one dared to speak again. The cultivators on the sea are also people who moved from inland. There are many reasons. The majority are forced by their enemies, but there is also a very small portion that came out to search for treasures. When they heard the word treasures, many people immediately pricked up their ears and instantly became alert. They seemed to have forgotten that they were now soaking in the seawater of the boundless sea, and how to return to the shore was a problem. Legend has it that there are secret treasures buried in the boundless sea. Qin Wei only said this, and didn't explain very clearly. Many people were itching, but who dared to force an immortal palace tier-grade elite? Swim quickly. They returned to reality. Their main goal was to return to the shore. If they were really trapped on an isolated island for endless years, they might all go crazy. After another few hours, they finally got close to the island. This was a very large island with a coastline of hundreds of kilometers. However, in the boundless sea region, this was actually a small island. Some islands were as big as a heaven domain. An island that was less than the size of a planet was not even qualified to be called an island. It could only be regarded as a larger reef. No wonder this island hasn't been discovered for hundreds of millions of years, even though it's only a dozen or so days away from the normal sea route. It turns out that it's too small. Qin Wei nodded. However, the value of an island was that it could shelter it from the wind and rain. This was especially so when tsunamis wreaked havoc. Ships would be in danger of capsizing. However, an island did not have to worry about this problem, as it had existed for countless years. If it wanted to sink, it would have long since sunk. In the surging seawater, they were pushed ashore, all of them exhausted. Back then, when they had desperately activated the formation, everyone's origin energy had been overdrawn. After that, they hadn't had the time to recover. Instead, they had to fight against the waves and row their way forward. It must be known that the waves in the endless sea domain weren't gentle at all. They could even cause great trouble for dividing soul realm experts. Thus, once they reached ashore, the majority of them lay down in exhaustion, feeling a kind of joy, as if they had survived a calamity. Once they reached ashore, they would really be safe. Qin Wei was at the Immortal Palace tier, so he was naturally much better than the others. He rose into the air and surveyed this island from a high vantage point. However, for an Immortal Palace tier elite, it would only take an instant for him to see everything within a radius of a few hundred miles. He very quickly descended, and then frowned, saying, "The people of the island have come." The people who were still lying on the ground panting felt a chill in their hearts. What kind of attitude would the people of this island have? If the other party's strength was slightly weaker, then it wouldn't matter. No matter what thoughts they had, they wouldn't care at all. However, if the other party's strength was similar, or even overwhelming, then they would have to pray that the other party had no ill intentions towards them. The island was very small. Thus, after a short while, 3 people could be seen stepping through the air and arriving. These 3 people were all youths, 2 men and 1 woman. The 2 men were very handsome, and each had their own unique characteristics. One was boorish, while the other was delicate and pretty. Meanwhile, the woman was incredibly charming and incredibly alluring. "Why have you all come to my Midway Island?" the delicate and pretty man asked. "We encountered a tsunami, and we're stranded here. Master, please stay for a few days. After we cut some trees to make a boat, we will leave," Qin Wei said. He didn't underestimate the other party. Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. He had a feeling that these 3 young people were very strong. Perhaps they weren't a match for him, but they should have battle prowess that was slightly stronger than the Earth Soul tier. However, the problem was that he really couldn't determine their cultivation levels. Not even one. To determine a person's cultivation level, generally speaking, one had to be at least a major tier higher. It was normal that Ling Han couldn't determine it, but the abnormal part was that he couldn't even sense whether they were dividing soul tier or severing mundane tier. This was as if the 3 of them hadn't cultivated before. Yes, this was the feeling. But this was completely impossible, because his intuition told him that these 3 people weren't weak. Strange, too strange. "Oh, so that's how it is." The delicate and pretty man nodded. "Then I can represent my master to welcome you all. Please, take a seat at the Han residence, and wash off the dust of your travels. We can slowly talk about the matter of leaving." "Then many thanks." Qin Wei nodded. "I am Xiao Jun." The delicate and pretty man introduced himself. "This is my junior brother Luo He. And this is my junior sister, and also my master's only daughter Lan Ruaji." Qin Wei also introduced himself, and also briefly recounted the experience of encountering the tsunami. Xiao Jun and the others were moved, saying that this kind of tsunami was very rare. In their millions of years of life, they had only seen it a few times. This caused many people to be stunned. The three of them were obviously very strong, but they had actually only cultivated for a few million years? Inconceivable, too inconceivable. May I ask, what cultivation level are the three of you? Ling Han couldn't help but ask. This doubt had been lingering in his heart all this time, and he had to ask them. Ling Han, how can you be so rude? Someone immediately criticized. The other party was willing to take them in, and even treat them well, but you actually asked them about a very private matter. What if they were angered, and they were chased out? If the other party was weak, then so be it. But now, the other party wasn't weak at all. That's right. How can you ask this kind of thing right off the bat? Someone agreed. The three of you, this is only a refugee that our ship has taken in, and actually has nothing to do with us. Another person began to dissociate himself from Ling Han. Chapter 2017. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head inwardly. When they were in trouble at sea, everyone could still share the joys and sorrows. But now that they were saved and freed, they all revealed their selfish sides. Forget it. Since you guys don't want to be in the same boat, I don't care whether you live or die. Ling Han waved his hand, smiled, and said, since you guys don't want to play together, then so be it. Ling Han, you really are an ungrateful guy, someone reprimanded. Lord Qin let you board the ship out of kindness, yet you have no gratitude. You really are a beast. Right, too inhumane. I'm ashamed to be associated with you. Everyone reprimanded, and even Qin Wei showed an expression of disgust. Ling Han was astonished. He had indeed been taken in by Qin Wei, and this was the truth. However, they had already agreed that he would not be a guest when he boarded the ship. Instead, he would help to activate the formation and provide power to the ship. This was a fair deal. Moreover, when the tsunami occurred, did he not do his best? It could be said that without his full effort, perhaps the ship wouldn't have survived the last wave, and would have long since collapsed. Then, how many people could still stand here and criticize him? There would be several question marks. On the other hand, Ling Han had the Black Tower, so he didn't have to worry about his life at all. Speaking of being ungrateful, these people were the real deal, okay? Ling Han didn't say anything else. On the account of being in the same boat, he couldn't be bothered to argue with these people. But he also drew a line in his heart, and from now on, they had nothing to do with him. No matter, no matter. Xiao Jun, on the other hand, smiled and tried to smooth things over. My master obtained a treasure left behind by an ancient great elite, and cultivated a mystical art. He took a different path, so you guys are unable to determine our cultivation level. Ancient great elite mystical art? These words immediately made everyone excited, and they couldn't help but think of what Qin Wei said. There were treasures in the boundless sea region, and the master of these three people had obtained a rare treasure. Anything that touched on the ancient era represented great power. The three of us are equivalent to Yang Soul tier, Luo, he said. Oh, everyone nodded. However, Ling Han's heart trembled. Sun Soul stage. But according to his intuition, these three people had at least the combat power of the Earth Soul stage, and he trusted his intuition very much. There was only one possibility. All three of them were emperors. 3 emperors suddenly appeared on a small island. Is that even possible? Ling Han felt that the possibility of this was very small. But how could this explain the extraordinary strength of these 3 people? This was strange. Come this way. Xiao Jun and the other 2 deliberately slowed down their pace, so that everyone could leisurely enjoy the scenery along the way. The trees here were not very tall, but they were colorful and very beautiful. After walking for about half an hour, they finally arrived in front of the building that they were previously at. This was an ancient castle that should have been around for a very, very long time. The walls of the ancient castle were covered in moss, exuding the vicissitudes of time. Please. Everyone thought that only Xiao Jun and his disciples lived in the ancient castle, but they did not expect that there were many people here. There were men and women, old and young. They were all cultivators, But just like Xiao Jun and the other two, no matter how strong or weak they were, they could not reveal their cultivation. Although the others felt that it was strange, they did not take it to heart. Previously, Xiao Jun had said that their master had obtained an ancient cultivation method and had taken a different path, so it was normal that he could not reveal his cultivation. Ling Han was even more curious, because when he entered the ancient castle, he saw the stone sculptures on both sides. They were two humanoid figures, but they had wings on their backs, and their feet were like cow hooves. They also had a long tail and two horns on their heads. Ling Han had never seen such creatures before. Was it really that simple for them to cultivate an ancient technique? The people in the ancient castle were very friendly. When Ling Han and the others entered, they all swarmed over and greeted them. Some even took out food and wine and invited them to their homes as guests. Haha, everyone as guests, please do as the host likes. Xiao Jun said, my master is currently in closed-door cultivation. Perhaps he will come out occasionally. At that time, I will report to him. Perhaps my master will be very willing to receive all of you guests. Everyone nodded. It was already good enough that the master was willing to take them in. Whether the master was willing to meet them or not, it naturally depended on the master's mood. They did not dare to be impudent. There were a few people in the ancient castle with terrifying auras. Even if their cultivation levels were not obvious, they could feel that they were powerful. They should be comparable to immortal mansions. Everyone finally settled down. However, Xiao Jun said that everything on the island belonged to the island lord, who was also their master. Without the island lord's permission, they could not take away a single blade of grass or tree. Thus, they could not cut wood to make boats. They could only quietly wait for the island lord to speak. However, a few days later, Xiao Jun appeared again. It was still the three of them, and he invited all the outsiders to be guests. Since the master had invited them, and they had a favor to ask, they naturally had no reason to refuse. Everyone arrived at the ancient castle's martial training field at the appointed time. There were not only Xiao Jun's trio here. There were also many residents of the ancient castle. However, everyone was clearly separated and sat on two sides. The martial training field was really not big. There were no more than 100 spectator seats. However, the combat area used the rules of space. It seemed small, but was actually large. They did not have to worry about not being able to stretch their arms and legs. Everyone sat down one by one. A servant girl served fragrant tea. The reception could be considered very attentive. Brother Xiao, has the island lord spoken? Qin Wei could not help but ask. He had the highest cultivation level among this group of survivors. Moreover, he was also a member of the Qin clan. He had ample reason to bring everyone back to the shore. Thus, what he was most concerned about was the matter of returning. Xiao Jun shook his head and said, don't be anxious, Lord Qin. My master is currently comprehending a divine ability. Without his permission, we do not dare to disturb him. Please stay for a few days. Qin Wei could only shut his mouth. He could only be anxious in his heart. Brother Xiao, why have you invited us here today? An impatient person immediately asked. Luo he smiled and said, we're all cultivators, and we've been living overseas for a long time, so we only know how to build a cart behind closed doors. That's why I want to spar with you all, so that I can know what I'm lacking. Hearing this, everyone revealed a prideful look. Of course, you only obtained an ancient technique. However, just one ancient technique is not enough. A martial artist's strength is also affected by immortal techniques, combat experience, talent, and so on. In any case, it was impossible to build a cart behind closed doors. If he could not suppress his opponent with his cultivation level, then he would definitely be inferior to his opponent in a battle of the same cultivation level. I am Feng Dang, and my cultivation level should be equivalent to the fourth severance. Who is willing to spar with me? A young man jumped out. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and he had a kind of wild charm. I'll do it. Another person jumped out from Qin Wei's side, but he was no longer young. Instead, he was a middle-aged man in his early 50s. However, in the immortal domain, age was definitely not a problem, as long as one could withstand the immortal's tribulation. Please enlighten me. Feng Dang cupped his hands together and immediately charged forward. Bam! A shadow flashed by, and only Feng Dang was left standing at his original spot. Instant victory. Chapter 2018. Everyone had not finished their preparations, and the battle had already ended. So fast. No, how could a battle of equals end so quickly? The other must have concealed his cultivation level and suppressed him with the cultivation level of dividing soul tier. But when everyone thought carefully, they found that it was not right. Though everyone cultivated different cultivation techniques, their cultivation level could be seen the moment they attacked. Though it was still a little unclear what cultivation level Feng Dang was at, it was definitely not dividing soul tier. This was certain. Perhaps the other had the bearing of a king tier, invincible among his peers. Everyone suppressed the shock in their hearts. After all, they were only a group of sailors, a group of merchants, so how could there possibly be a king tier? What king tier would run out to be a sailor or a merchant? I am Lu Yi, and my cultivation level is also equivalent to the fourth severance. Please enlighten me. On the side of the castle, another young man jumped out. I'll go, Peng. The person on Qin Wei's side had just jumped out and was sent flying with a punch. He was not a match at all. This time, the people on Qin Wei's side were all moved. Did king tiers appear one after another like this? Looking closely at Feng Dang and Lu Yi, the aptitude of these two really could not be considered very good. Which king tier did not have exceptional aptitude? Then, the other was not a king tier, and did not have the advantage of cultivation level. So what right did he have to have stronger battle prowess? There was only one answer. The cultivation technique they cultivated was too powerful. Was it really so? I am at the Yang Soul tier, and would like to seek guidance from everyone. A person on Qin Wei's side jumped out and challenged the side of the castle. I am Emohan. A young man walked out, handsome and spirited, with a kind of might that could subdue others. Cultivation level equivalent to the fifth severance. Fifth severance. When these two words were spoken, many people on Qin Wei's side showed expressions of bewilderment. Fifth severance? What fifth severance? Wasn't the fourth severance the limit of the severing mundane tier? How could there be a fifth severance? But some people also showed expressions of disbelief, so shocked that their scalps were about to explode. That was a monarch tier. Ling Han's eyes also lit up, the doubt in his eyes growing stronger. Counting Xiao Jun and the others, that was 4 monarch tiers. In the Eastern Celestial Realm, how did monarch tiers come about? From the population. Only one monarch tier could be born with a population of billions and trillions. And it was not enough to just have the aptitude of a monarch tier. Without a celestial king-level reserve, such as the natural peach seal, how could one survive the heavenly tribulation of the fifth severance? Could it be that there is an immortal king on this island? The population was pitifully small, but there were actually 4 emperors. That didn't make sense. Also, what the hell are their cultivation methods? Ling Han thought about it carefully, and suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. He felt as if he had seen these people's moves before. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't match it to any of them. Bam! On the other side, Emohan was also fighting with Qin Wei's people. Similarly, he solved the problem with one move. This was very normal. In terms of cultivation level, the fifth severance was equivalent to Yang Soul, and those that could advance into this cultivation level were all monarch tiers, able to surpass 2 tiers and be invincible. Wasn't that instant victory a very normal thing? The sparring continued. In a fight of the same level, the castle's side had the absolute advantage. Even if the opponent was weaker by 1 or 2 levels, the castle's side could still win. The difference in strength was truly shocking. The people on Qin Wei's side all lowered their heads, their faces red. Just then they were still self-righteous, thinking that the people in the castle were making things up, and that their strength was definitely extremely weak. But when they fought, they found out that they were all fierce men, which naturally made them feel ashamed. I really didn't expect everyone's strength, hee. Xiao Jun said with a smile. He wanted to speak but stopped. But the meaning he wanted to express was clear to everyone. You guys are too weak, and you said you would let us experience it, but all of you are weaklings, and none of you can fight. These words caused everyone to lower their heads even more. A hint of mockery flashed across Xiao Jun's eyes, and he continued, "My master has no intention of hiding anything, but I am willing to share the cultivation techniques that we cultivate with everyone." What? Hearing these words, everyone raised their heads, all of them in disbelief. Techniques couldn't be passed on easily. This was an ancient teaching, not to mention an outsider. Even to one's own people, father and son, the core secret technique couldn't be passed on easily, and they had to confirm that this son was indeed worthy of nurturing. For example, in a great clan, only a few core clansmen could cultivate the highest level cultivation techniques, and the others would have to cultivate slightly lower level ones. This was the case in any sect, and only a few people, or even only one person, could cultivate the highest level cultivation techniques. But now, Xiao Jun actually said that he would take out the cultivation techniques that they cultivated and share them with everyone. Everyone looked at each other, thinking that they had heard wrongly. Was there really such a good person in this world? Actually, our cultivation technique is very simple. The most important thing is to borrow strength. Xiao Jun continued, "We believe in a celestial spirit between heaven and earth. As long as we sincerely pray to him during battle, he will bestow us with boundless power. Are there any volunteers? We can test it on the spot, and I guarantee that your battle strength will immediately increase by several times, or even 10 times. This caused everyone to dare not believe it. Just by believing in a celestial spirit, one's battle strength could increase by at most 10 times. I'll do it. A person jumped out. It was fine to believe in him, but if it was useless, he could just stop believing in him in the future. Xiao Jun smiled and pulled that person over, whispering in his ear for a while. In just a short while, that person walked onto the stage doubtfully and said, "Little Hai, come and spar with me. My strength is similar to yours, and we often spar. Whether my strength has increased or not, you will be the clearest when I spar with you." Okay. Another person jumped out from Qin Wei's side. The two began to fight, exchanging blows. It was impossible to tell who was stronger and who was weaker. It was useless. "Believe in the celestial spirit," Xiao Jun said, his voice slow and unhurried. That person shivered and muttered something. No one knew what he was saying, but he suddenly became fierce and began to suppress his opponent. Then he became fiercer and fiercer, and his battle strength increased by 4 or 5 times. Fuck, it really worked. Everyone was shocked, speechless. This was even more fierce than eating a celestial pill. Just believing in a celestial spirit could increase one's battle strength by several times. It was hard to believe, but also incomparably desired. "Young Master Xiao, can I practice such a cultivation technique?" "Yes, can I as well?" Quite a few people immediately called out, their expressions incredibly excited. No wonder there were so many king tears, emperor tears, and even quite a few monarch tears here. So that was how it was. Xiao Jun showed a smile and said, "My master has never kept his skills to himself. With the intention of benefiting the world, he is willing to practice a wondrous cultivation technique with everyone." Wait! With a soft shout, Ling Han stood up and leaped onto the stage. "My hands are also itching, and I wish to spar with everyone." Just then, he finally recalled why he had felt that the moves of those in the ancient castle were slightly familiar. He still remembered that when he was in the ancient realm, he had once entered a mystery realm. There was a mysterious river there, and there were many tribes by the river. These people were all cultivators, but they belonged to a completely different cultivation system. They did not cultivate regulations, or rather, they did not cultivate the regulations of this heaven and earth. The source of their power was that mysterious river. Ling Han had once tried to trace the source but could not go. Only Little Gu had gone, and a great battle had even erupted. In the end, Little Gu had returned wounded. Exactly the same. Chapter 2020. The people from the castle all turned pale with fright. They were full of confidence in their own cultivation methods and the immortal spirits they believed in. Reality had proven countless times that their cultivation system was just that high and mighty. Did they think that this was the first time Ling Han and the others had come to this island? Wrong. Who knew how many batches of people had come here? It was just that after coming here, no one had ever left. But now, an outsider, whose cultivation realm was clearly lower than Xiao Jun's, was actually suppressing Xiao Jun. After all, Xiao Jun was the most talented among them. If even Xiao Jun was defeated, then no one in the same cultivation realm would be a match for Ling Han. This overturned their long-held sense of superiority, causing a crack to appear in their confidence, and their faith in their immortal spirits to waver. Xiao Jun roared angrily. He tried his best to turn the tables, but it was all in vain. Ling Han was indeed stronger than him. Though he wasn't much stronger, at their level, how could there be the slightest bit of difference? When they had fought for close to 1,000 rounds, Ling Han kicked out. Pung! Xiao Jun was sent flying by the kick, and he crashed solidly into the wall. Brother Ling is indeed formidable. Xiao Jun rubbed his chest, which was still in pain, and squeezed out a smile. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Thanks for letting me win." He did not listen to Small Tower's words, and directly killed the other party. That was because this was the other party's territory, and there were several Immortal Palace tier elites here. That island mistress who had been in seclusion all this time was more likely to be in the ascending origin tier. If he killed someone, he would lose all pretense of cordiality, and there would be no way out. Hearing Xiao Jun admit defeat, the people of the ancient castle were in an uproar. The immortal spirit that they had believed in for a long time almost collapsed in an instant, which was unacceptable to them. Xiao Jun, however, did not seem to mind. Instead, the smile on his face became even wider as he said, "Brother Ling's talent in martial art is truly astonishing. If Brother Ling is willing to change to my master's line of martial arts, I can guarantee that Brother Ling's strength will rise to another level." Everyone nodded in agreement. Previously, that so-and-so had only worshipped a certain immortal spirit, and his battle prowess had instantly increased by 4 or 5 times. If the same principle could be used on Ling Han, how powerful would he be then? Because of this, the people in the castle regained their confidence. That's right. What conflict would there be between the strength of Ling Han and the strength of their celestial spirits? As long as Ling Han converted to believe in their god, then Ling Han would become even stronger. Wouldn't that mean that there was nothing wrong with their choice? Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head as he looked at the fervent gazes around him. Everything he did just now was in vain. Firstly, these people were too fascinated. Secondly, Xiao Jun's adaptability was really on point. Otherwise, as long as he flew into a rage out of humiliation, it would intensify the suspicions in everyone's hearts. Interesting an opponent. A smile appeared at the corners of Ling Han's lips. Although Small Tower's words were very frightening, to shake the foundation of a heaven and earth, one would have to know that the person had to change their cultivation technique first. Merely these 30 or so people now. A drop in the ocean. Then let's play and let him make a big fuss. It would be best if LV Herong came here and swept this place with a single push. To their heaven and earth, the people in the castle were equivalent to vermin. They were existences that would affect the heaven and earth. Though it was a towering building and definitely not something that a few vermin could destroy, if they were not quickly trampled to death, who knew how strong they would become in the future? For example, among the 30 or so people today, once they were bewitched by Xiao Jun, how many of them would turn to him? This kind of vermin should be exterminated immediately. "Young Master Xiao, please teach me a celestial technique," someone called out shamelessly. "Please teach me a celestial technique." Even more people called out. Xiao Jun's face revealed a hint of pride. The situation that could have been a complete mess had returned to the right track, with just a few words from him. He couldn't help but want to cheer for himself. "There's no need to rush. My master has a great wish to pass down his techniques to the world. He definitely won't keep it to himself," he said with a smile, appearing extremely sincere. This caused the outsiders to be incredibly moved. They felt that the island master here was really the best person in the world. His supreme techniques were selflessly passed down, and there was definitely no other person like him. Meanwhile, Ling Han smirked coldly in his heart. At first, He had been slightly curious as to why Xiao Jun had insisted on passing down his master's techniques to outsiders. However, with Small Tower's explanation, Ling Han understood that this was a kind of invasion. Once they succeeded, it would be a calamity that would destroy the entire celestial realm. No, the celestial realm, the ancient realm, and all the small worlds. Going by this logic, the excuse that the island master was in seclusion and could not decide whether they were allowed to go logging or not was actually completely false. His goal was to prevent them from leaving the island. Those who are willing to learn my master's techniques, please follow me, Xiao Jun said in a clear voice. Instantly, there was a clamor, and almost everyone followed. Apart from Ling Han. Ling Han was astonished. Even Qin Wei had been bewitched. Very quickly, everyone here had left. Apart from Ling Han, only Lan Ruaji, this delicate and charming girl, was still sitting in a graceful posture. Her arms were stretched out on the back of the chair, causing her chest to protrude even more. There was a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth, and her charming eyes were filled with a challenging look. Ling Han was not like others easily hooked. This piqued her interest, and she wanted to personally pull Ling Han to their side. And if she succeeded, she would obtain her 17th concubine. That's right, she liked to play with men, and as long as a man was with her, no matter how talented he was, he would not be able to resist her charm. Young Master Ling is really amazing. I have been on this island for so many years, but this is the first time I have seen eldest senior brother lose in a battle of the same cultivation level, she said in a delicate voice, her voice like a melody, extremely pleasant to the ears. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, there are at least a dozen or 20 people like me in the Eastern Celestial Realm, and even more in the Western Celestial Realm. Who cared whether he had them or not? He would just boast first. Meanwhile, Lan Ruaji smiled coquettishly. Young Master Ling, just now, eldest senior brother asked you if you would be willing to join my sect. There are supreme mystical techniques that will allow your battle prowess to increase by at least 10-fold, under the condition that your cultivation level does not change. Didn't you say that your father had the wish to spread the knowledge of cultivation? Why would he still want to join you? Ling Han asked smilingly. Spreading the knowledge of cultivation is spreading the knowledge of cultivation, but the true mystical techniques are only taught to the most core members. Don't you think so, young Master Ling? Lan Ruaji suddenly straightened her upper body. When she said yes or no, she used her finger to lightly tap on her chest. Under the tight cloth, the perfectly round curves of her mountain peaks were revealed, and were extremely alluring. Ling Han ignored her. In terms of appearance, she could not compare to the Empress, and who knew no matter how hard she tried. In terms of bearing, the Empress was miles behind her, and in terms of charm, bewitching Maiden Ro was even more inferior to her. He had not even been moved by bewitching Maiden Ro. What more this kind of trash? Ling Han's mind spun quickly. It was completely unrealistic for him to destroy the forces of this island with his own strength. Then, there were only two paths laid out in front of him. The first was to wait for LV Herong to arrive, and then raze this place to the ground. The second was to feign civility first, and then take the chance to build a ship and leave. In the future, he would come back and destroy this place. No matter what, he could not turn hostile with the other party now. Thus, Ling Han thought for a moment and said, I am a little interested now. Today was 6 in the morning, and tomorrow would also be 6 in the morning. He had changed to a new bed, and he actually slept so much that his waist hurt. Reading on his phone was even more refreshing. Chapter 2021. Lan Ruaji revealed a proud smile. She was confident that her charm was invincible, and how could Ling Han be her match? She was really a frog in a well. On this small island, there were only a few people, and she was indeed beautiful and charming, so she naturally became a unique flower. However, in the Eastern and Western celestial realms, though she could still be called a beauty, there was still some distance between her and absolute beauty. It couldn't be helped. Who asked her to have never seen a real beauty? So she naturally thought she was extremely beautiful. Come, young Master Ling, I'll take you around, she invited. She should be glad that Hunyo didn't appear now. or she would definitely slap him. Ling Han nodded. He also wanted to know more about this island. The two of them first walked around the castle. Previously, they were restricted in the area, but now that there was an island owner's daughter leading the way, they naturally could go all the way. Where does this place lead to? Ling Han asked, pointing at a stone door. Previously, when they encountered a place with a door blocking them, Lan Ruaji would directly push the door open, but she ignored this stone door. Ling Han carefully examined this large door. There were actually multiple formation patterns on it. Obviously, there was a formation set up here. If the formation could not be opened at the first instant, then the formation would either attack or send out an alarm. Lan Ruaji smiled charmingly and said, "This you have to wait until you truly become one of us before you are qualified to know." So mysterious? Ling Han pretended to be curious. Hehe. Lan Ruaji's lips were very tight, and she didn't reveal anything. Instead, she dragged Ling Han away. After that, Ling Han repeatedly brought the topic back, but Lan Ruaji always used the same reason to avoid it. Only a person who truly became a member of the castle was qualified to know further secrets. The two of them walked, and soon walked around the entire castle. Ling Han suddenly frowned. He sensed a strange aura. What's wrong? Lan Ruaji didn't sense anything. Ha 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 ha. As expected of a genius among geniuses, discovering my existence so quickly. Amidst the long laughter, a slender man walked out from behind a huge stone pillar. Fourth uncle. Seeing this, Lan Ruaji immediately bowed respectfully. Ling Han was also sizing up the man. He looked very young, and had a head of messy black hair. He looked very handsome. Most importantly, this person was very strong. He gave Ling Han an unfathomable feeling. I heard that someone defeated Xiao Jun, so I came over. This young man spoke. In any case, in the immortal realms, one's appearance couldn't represent one's age. It was possible that a white-haired old man would have to call a little brat grandfather. This is Ling Han. Lan Ruaji introduced. This is my fourth uncle Lan Tianyu. Ling Han cupped his hands and said, Master Lan. Lan Tianyu extended a finger. Wang, he took out a ring and enveloped the three of them. From Ling Han's perspective, the world was magnified endlessly, and he immediately appeared in a vast and boundless prairie. From the outside world, it was clear that Ling Han and the other two had shrunk rapidly, and they were countless times smaller than this grain of rice. This was a spatial divine item, but it didn't directly store people inside. Instead, it affected the surrounding environment. Ling Han could directly fly away. As long as he left this area, he would naturally return to his original state. He was a little displeased, although he wasn't afraid of challenges. Directly pulling people into a battle, without his consent, made him feel strongly disgusted. This kind of person deserved to be beaten up. Come experience it. Lan Tianyu flew out and attacked Ling Han. He naturally cultivated a different system of martial art. When he struck out with his palm, there were no ripples of the great Tao or the light of rules. There was only a ray of black light wrapped around his palm. It emitted an incomparably evil yet shockingly powerful aura. Ling Han clenched his fists and met it head-on. Pung pung pung. The two began an intense battle. In a short instant, they had exchanged over a dozen moves. Lan Ruaji was dazed. Although she also had the strength of an emperor, she still felt like she couldn't see the battle clearly. These two were too strong. She naturally understood how powerful Lan Tianyu was. But what shocked her was that Ling Han could actually fight evenly with Lan Tianyu. One had to know that Lan Tianyu was even stronger than Xiao Jun. She knew that Ling Han had defeated Xiao Jun, but she definitely didn't think that Ling Han had the strength to rival Lan Tianyu. But now the truth spoke louder than words. It made her stare wide open, and it made her even more passionate. She liked strong men. She would feel an incomparably wonderful sense of conquest. Unfortunately, although there was no lack of handsome young men and middle-aged uncles who had wandered to the island, none of them were as strong as her in a battle of the same level. Now that Ling Han had appeared, she was instantly set ablaze. Boom boom boom. Ling Han and Lan Tianyu were still exchanging blows. Sometimes they fought very quickly, exchanging dozens of blows in an instant. But sometimes they fought very slowly, exchanging only one blow after 3 or 4 breaths of time. But in reality, the slower they attacked, the more dangerous it was. Both sides were using big moves, and their lethality had increased by a large margin. Of course, this danger was actually for Lan Tianyu. Ling Han's physique was tyrannical, and no one in the dividing soul realm could kill him. If not for the fact that he didn't want to reveal his trump card, he could completely exchange blows with his opponent. Then, Lan Tianyu would tragically discover that he was riddled with wounds and not far from death. But Ling Han was completely fine. Lan Tianyu was indeed stronger than Xiao Jun, and not just by a little. He gave Ling Han a lot of pressure. According to Ling Han's estimation, this person's true combat strength should be equivalent to the peak of the Earth's soul realm. Then, after extracting the so-called celestial spirit power, his combat strength soared to the early, or even middle stage of the heavenly soul realm. This was enough to rival Ling Han, and he might even be slightly superior to him. So this was the reason why there were so many emperors and emperors on the island. Those were not their true combat strength. Fourth uncle, it's about time, right? Lan Ruaji called out from the side. Okay. Lan Tianyu stopped, and a proud expression appeared on his face. Although it was still difficult to determine who was superior, he was confident that he would have the upper hand in just a few moves. And he believed that Ling Han was also aware of this. Since he had the upper hand, he was naturally happy to stop fighting. After all, his goal in fighting with Ling Han was not to kill this young man, but to let him know that there was still someone here who could suppress him. Ling Han also smiled faintly. In terms of battle prowess, Lan Tianyu was indeed slightly stronger, but that was because his own cultivation level was lower. In terms of true power, he could toy with the other to death with one hand. What was the point of winning by relying on external power? You can indeed borrow power now, but can you borrow it all the time? Can you guarantee that you can borrow it in every corner of the celestial realm? Ling Han didn't believe that. The borrowed power did not come from heaven and earth, but from a powerful existence, such as a ninth heaven celestial king. But a ninth heaven celestial king was not omnipotent. For example, if a ninth heaven celestial king wanted to borrow power, how could he borrow it? Compared to this, Ling Han believed in his own strength more. Chapter 2022. Lan Tianyu had achieved his goal in this battle. He laughed loudly and swaggered off. Young Master Ling, don't take it to heart. Firstly, fourth uncle's realm is above yours. Secondly, you haven't received the celestial spirit's blessing. Otherwise, you would also be able to borrow the power of the celestial spirit. You definitely wouldn't be weaker than fourth uncle. Lan Ruaji comforted him. Of course, Ling Han would not take it to heart. If it was a life and death battle, he could guarantee that the one who died would definitely be Lan Tianyu. However, there was no need to say this. Firstly, Lan Ruaji would think that he was a sore loser. Secondly, he didn't want to reveal his trump card. Young Master Ling, let's go and prepare for the worship ceremony. Who knows? My father might even admire your talent and take you in as a disciple, Lan Ruaji said. She seemed to think that Ling Han could no longer escape from her gentle trap. Ling Han's heart stirred, and he asked, "What's the cultivation level of the island master?" Lan Ruaji hesitated slightly, but still answered, "Father is equivalent to an ascending origin tier elite." Ascending origin. Ling Han nodded to himself. The strength of this island was not simple. If it was placed in the eastern celestial realm, it would be a genuine 4-star force. It was quite powerful. Under the guidance of Lan Ruaji, Ling Han came to a room in the castle. Qin Wei and the others were all here. Everyone was waiting. They had to first take a bath and burn incense. Only after an entire 3 days would they be able to formally pay their respects to that immortal spirit. Ling Han understood the process. During this process, he had to offer a strand of his soul to the immortal spirit. It was just a tiny bit, and it would not affect his body at all. However, this was something that Ling Han could never accept. First of all, in order to cultivate to the peak of the realm, one's soul must be absolutely intact. Secondly, there were many evil arts in the world that required blood and souls to perform. Giving a part of his soul to someone else was tantamount to putting his life in the palm of someone else's hand. How could I do that? Sure enough, what Pufa, what fairy, they were all fake. How could there be a free lunch in this world? But Qin Wei and the others didn't care in the slightest. Their thirst for strength had already surpassed everything else. To them, to say nothing of the Celestial King tier, they might not even be able to reach the Ascending Origin tier, or Immortal Palace tier in this lifetime. Thus, what need was there for them to care about the integrity of their divine sense? As for having their lives controlled by others, that was something that they had never even considered. Right now, all they could think about was the opportunity to improve their strength effortlessly. Everyone, do you really believe that there's such a good deal? Ling Han said when they were the only ones sitting quietly. He had no intention of saving these people. He just wanted to create more trouble for the castle. Ling Han, what do you mean by this? Someone immediately jumped up. Do you want to enjoy the immortal's blessing for yourself? Ling Han was astonished. His intentions had actually been so misinterpreted by others. You are already an emperor, and can be said to be invincible in the same realm. Even if we are blessed by celestial spirits, we can't be stronger than you. So why are you jealous of us? That's right. I just hate people like you. You can't see others doing better than you. And you call yourself an emperor? You're just so petty, Pa. Relying on the fact that Qin Wei was present, everyone spoke without politeness. In any case, they would be riding on the celestial spirits in the future. Whether Ling Han was an emperor or not, what did it matter to them whether he became a celestial king or not? Without any desire, they would naturally be able to straighten their backs in front of Ling Han. This seemed to have ignited everyone's passion. They began to clamor and denounce Ling Han, as if Ling Han had done some unpardonable crime. Every 2 hours, someone would come in and replace an incense stick. And when it was time to replace the incense stick, someone would secretly pull on the person who replaced the incense stick, saying something unknown. The person who replaced the incense stick left, and only a short while later, Xiao Jun appeared. He waved at Ling Han and said, "Brother Ling, please come out and say a few words." Ling Han was sure that he had been snitched on. He'd like to see what the other party would do. He stood up and walked out side by side with Xiao Jun. "Brother Ling, do you still have some doubts about the gods that we believe in?" Xiao Jun asked calmly. "Naturally not." Ling Han evaded it cleanly. "But someone told me that Brother Ling's determination doesn't seem to be very firm," Xiao Jun said with a smile. "Brother Xiao, do you believe me or believe a piece of trash?" Ling Han countered. Xiao Jun couldn't help but muse. After a while, he suddenly laughed loudly and said, "Of course I believe Brother Ling." Ling Han only smiled. Who cared if the other believed him or not? In any case, he would definitely make a big fuss, and then enter the Black Tower to hide. Ascending Origin tier elites couldn't do anything to the Black Tower, and what he had to pay attention to was that he definitely couldn't be killed before entering the Black Tower. Boom! At this moment, the whole island shook as if an earthquake had occurred. Xiao Jun was startled at first, but then he looked shocked. "Not good, the beast tide is attacking." Woo! Right at this moment a strange horn sounded. In an instant, the entire ancient castle was alarmed. "Everyone come out, the beast tide is attacking." Xiao Jun ran into the quiet room and shouted loudly at everyone. "What beast tide? There's a beast tide in the Boundless Sea region? I've never heard of it." Everyone looked at each other, all appearing very confused, all of them very confused. "Less nonsense, all come out," Xiao Jun shouted harshly. This kind of attitude caused many people to be displeased. Previously, they had all addressed them as esteemed guests, allowing them to enjoy the ostentation of a lord. But now, their attitude changed, and they were shouting at them. This change was really too big. Ling Han smirked coldly internally. The ancient castle was so polite, because they wanted them to change to another cultivation system. Before they achieved their goal, they would naturally be incredibly enthusiastic. But the appearance of the beast tide this time seemed to have disrupted their arrangements. "If we can't withstand the beast tide, everyone will die," Xiao Jun said again, and these words were filled with killing power. Everyone jumped up as if their butts were on fire, and they all ran outside. Brother Ling, please do your best. Xiao Jun suddenly turned around and spoke to Ling Han solemnly. Ling Han smiled and said, "We are in the same boat through thick and thin. Naturally, we should work together." All right. The two of them walked at the back. When they walked out of the ancient castle, they saw that everyone in the castle had already moved out, heading west. The three sides of the island of Ascension are cliffs with killing formations. The beast tide won't be able to kill their way up, and they can only attack from the west. Xiao Jun explained, and his figure turned into a wisp of smoke, moving with the crowd. Ling Han followed, but he was thinking in his heart. Since killing formations could be set up on 3 sides, why couldn't they be set up on 4 sides? Then it was very likely that they had deliberately set up one side on 3 sides, so that those who had encountered a shipwreck and drifted here could go up to the island and spread their celestial spirit. Also, just now Qin Wei and the others were wondering why there would be a beast tide on the sea. These people had always been traversing the boundless sea region, and they should be quite experienced. But even they didn't know that there would be a beast tide on the sea. So why would it happen on this island? What other secrets were hidden on this small island? Ling Han suddenly became very curious. Chapter 2024. Ling Han had many enemies, but a person he had never seen before suddenly attacking him still made him very surprised. He casually kicked out, and with a ding, the ambusher's sword flew out of his hand. That was a pretty boy, his skin so fine that it could make many women jealous. His appearance was also relatively handsome, but his strength was a bit lacking, at most a 4th severance. Ling Han's expression was calm, and he asked, "Why do you want to kill me? You are my rival in love, so shouldn't I kill you?" The pretty boy raised his neck. Rival in love? Ling Han was surprised. When did he have such a rival in love? Wait, Lan Ruaji. He couldn't help but shake his head and said, "I think you have misunderstood." Is that so? The pretty boy did not attack anymore, and took 2 steps forward. You really won't fight over Ruaji with me? When he said the last word Ji, he suddenly attacked again. His right hand turned into a claw, and clawed fiercely at Ling Han's chest. This brat was really sneaky. Ling Han kicked again, and kicked between the pretty boy's legs. Oh! The pretty boy instantly cried out in pain, and his body involuntarily slumped down. His hands moved to protect his chest, and the cold sweat on his forehead dripped down layer by layer. I really can't tell. You look so fair and clean, but your heart is so black, Ling Han said. The pretty boy was already speechless. This kick was not just powerful enough, but also used a sliver of regulations of heaven and earth. For Ling Han, it was just a sliver. But for a 4th severance, this sliver was already enough to topple mountains and overturn seas. The veins on his forehead bulged, and after a long while he said, "It's you who is too stupid." "I'm stupid." Ling Han shook his head, and threw another punch. Pa! The pretty boy was instantly blasted into a rain of blood. Since he attacked him, then he should be prepared to be killed in return. Xiao 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 xiao, another 7 people pounced out, charging towards Ling Han. Although the 7 of them looked different, they all had one thing in common, and that was that they were particularly handsome and had delicate skin. All of them were pretty boys. Fuck, are they all Lan Ruaji's lovers? Ling Han felt disgusted. What kind of entanglement had he gotten himself into? Furthermore, these mistresses were a little too ruthless. They hadn't even met him, and they already wanted to kill him. Ling Han shook his head and punched out. Raging flames interweaved, and instantly turned the 7 of them into ashes. This also stunned the remaining people, and they no longer dared to jump out. They were indeed Lan Ruaji's lovers, and in Lan Ruaji's harem, lovers were allowed to kill each other. This was a kind of pleasure for Lan Ruaji. She enjoyed watching her lovers fight for her affections in front of her, but behind her back, they were fighting for her affections. Otherwise, she would have had more than 100 lovers a long time ago, not just a dozen or so. Later, it became a custom. As long as a new person joined, all the lovers would target them together. If they could get rid of them, they would get rid of them. However, this time, they had obviously kicked an iron plate. Ling Han was indescribably strong. It was really disgusting. Ling Han complained incessantly. He didn't expect that he would be involved in this farce, just by saying a few words to Lan Ruaji. If this was spread out, he would definitely be laughed at. He actually fought with a bunch of pretty boys for her affections. Fuck. Ling Han's figure rushed out, and his battle strength was fully unleashed. The Nine Heavens Fire Split Soul was also mobilized. Raging flames and soaring sword aura. The killing efficiency was astonishing. The attacks of the sea creatures came wave after wave, as if there was no end to it. Not to mention the others, even Ling Han felt a sense of exhaustion. Change shifts. A majestic voice rang out, and a new group of people came out of the castle. They replaced those who were already exhausted from fighting, and started a fierce battle with the sea creatures. Everyone retreated and sat on the ground, feeling that every bone in their body was incomparably sore. Ling Han was also seizing the time to recover his essence force. He had polished every stage to perfection, and his strength was endless. He could consume much more than people of the same stage, and his recovery was even faster. 3 days later, they changed shifts again. Qin Wei and the others were extremely depressed. They hadn't even enjoyed the benefits, but they had to risk their lives first. They had no choice but to fight. Once the sea creatures broke through the defensive line, everyone would be dead. This was like an endless war. The sea creatures were not afraid of death, and they attacked the island's defensive line with all their might. The people on the island resisted with all their might, turning the landing point into a meat grinder. What made Qin Wei and the others feel slightly relieved was that, at least until now, there were only injuries and no deaths. This was very inconceivable. Under such an attack, there were actually no deaths on their side. Ling Han didn't care at first, but soon discovered this. Thus, he turned his attention to others, and discovered that it wasn't that the people on their side were lucky, but that when someone's life was in danger, those sea creatures would mysteriously die. In the chaos of battle, this wasn't obvious, but as long as one paid attention, they would definitely discover it. Ling Han couldn't help but look in the direction of the castle. Up until now, that mysterious island master still hadn't shown himself. Perhaps it was him who acted in secret, ensuring that no one died. An ascending origin tier elite completely had this kind of ability. Why did he have to save everyone? Very simple. Everyone here was a learner and propagator of another cultivation system. So how could they be sacrificed at will? Another cultivation system would destroy the regulations of heaven and earth, and would be forbidden by all forces. When propagating, it had to be done in secret, and thus needed more manpower. On one hand, that island master needed people to help him carry out the sacrifice and slaughter the sea creatures. And on the other hand, he had to protect the people here to spread that new cultivation system. Thus there was the current situation. Connecting the dots, Ling Han thought that his thinking could very well explain everything, making him believe that his deduction was not wrong. Why is the beast tide this time so fierce? Some natives complained. Yes, in the past, it would at most last 2 or 3 days, but this time, it's almost 10 days. If this continues, everyone won't be able to hold on. Why hasn't the Lord Island Master appeared yet? With him turning the tide, we should be able to win easily. Yet Ling Han understood in his heart that that island master was definitely presiding over the sacrificial ceremony. Perhaps he didn't trust anyone, so he didn't even participate in the battle, and only occasionally saved people. Since the duration of the beast tide this time is longer than in the past, and Small Tower has also said that dispelling the green gold murderous aura will only require another 2 or 3 sacrifices, then it's very likely that the island master wants to compete for merit this time, and thus prolong the duration of the beast tide. Come, I should also make my move. Chapter 2025. Ling Han didn't know what method the people on the island had used to trigger the beast tide, but since it could be triggered, it could also be sustained. He didn't care about that. What he cared about was how to collect the source power of heaven and earth. The battle was still ongoing. The sea creatures attacked one after another, not caring about life or death at all. They just wanted to break through the defense line. 10 days, 15 days. On the 17th day, Ling Han suddenly felt the pressure lighten. The beast tide is starting to weaken. No new sea creatures are coming. It's finally going to end. We finally made it. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they were overjoyed. Although they were exhausted, not one of them died in such a fierce battle. This was a miracle. It's the protection of the celestial spirit, someone immediately said sincerely. This won the agreement of the others, and they all nodded. After eliminating the last wave of the beast tide, everyone knelt down and prayed devoutly in the direction of the castle. Qin Wei and the others looked at each other. Although they didn't receive the support of the celestial spirit in the battle, not one of them died. Who would believe it if a miracle didn't happen? Some people knelt down immediately, while others remained standing. They didn't even get the benefits, and they had already fought for others. Naturally, they couldn't kneel anymore. Ling Han quietly retreated. The beast tide had retreated, which meant that the sacrifice was coming to an end, and he could collect the source power of heaven and earth. Little Tower, lead the way. He came behind a large rock, broke through the soil, and drilled underground. The vital essence green gold was buried deep underground. If Ling Han practiced the rules of earth, then he wouldn't have to be so barbaric. As long as he activated the great Tao of earth, he would be the thick soil of the earth, and moving through the earth would be the same as moving through the air. But now there was no other way. He could only use brute force to create a path. Fortunately, his physique was strong enough, and his strength was definitely enough. As he went down, the mud and stones were like water in front of him. They affected his speed, but it wasn't obvious. Little Tower led the way, and Ling Han went down diagonally. After going down for thousands of meters, he gradually felt that it was difficult to move forward. The earth became very hard, as if it wasn't made of mud and stones, but made of celestial gold. Ling Han's heart stirred. It should be close to the astral origin green gold. Under the influence of the source energy of heaven and earth, the surrounding soil seemed to have turned into metal. Even under the effect of the vital origin green gold, did this soil turn into real metal, or even godly metal? Ling Han drew the divine demon sword. Firstly, he wanted to see if the divine demon sword could devour the metal elements in the air. Secondly, if he used the divine demon sword, his speed would be even faster. In terms of destructive power alone, the divine demon sword was superior to him. With his hope, the divine demon sword pierced out. Wang, the pseudo-celestial sword trembled slightly, and then the surrounding mud and rocks all became resplendent. Furthermore, they were alternating between bright and dark, as if they were breathing. It really is. Ling Han was stunned for a moment, and then couldn't help but be overjoyed. The mud and stones here had all become godly metal, and it was even possible that they had reached the level of several stars of pseudo-divine metal, which was why it was becoming more and more difficult for him to advance. However, to the divine demon sword, this was an incredibly delicious feast. Ling Han held the sword and advanced, allowing the divine demon sword to devour to its heart's content. His speed was actually even slower than before. That was because even if the divine demon sword could devour, it still needed time. However, Ling Han didn't show any signs of impatience. This kind of opportunity was really too rare. The formation of a source energy of heaven and earth was a matter of who knew how many hundreds of millions of years. In fact, it could even be calculated in terms of epochs. In the process of the formation of the source energy of heaven and earth, it would naturally affect the environment. Thus, it was actually very normal for the entire vein of the earth to become a layer of metal. In any case, he bumped into it, and he became rich. After descending for another few kilometers, Ling Han felt a murderous aura. This wasn't a feeling, but one that could be felt with the naked eye. After digging away the mud and rocks, he could discover that there were streams of air in the air that were shaped like sabers and swords. If he touched them, even with Ling Han's physique, he wouldn't be able to withstand them. He would be easily cut open, and blood would flow endlessly. This was the murderous aura of the great Tao of metal, and it was filled with frightening destructive power. Ling Han carefully avoided it, but discovered that it was incredibly difficult. The movement of these streams of air was completely irregular, and they continuously spun chaotically. Moreover, once they moved, They were incredibly fast. In fact, before his nerves could even react, they had already scratched him. However, when Ling Han occasionally used the Divine Demon Sword to parry one of the attacks, he discovered that the Divine Demon Sword could even devour this kind of murderous aura. He suddenly had a kind of realization. What the Divine Demon Sword actually devoured was actually the regulations of the Great Tao of Metal, and not the metal itself. Thus, after the metal was devoured by it, it would turn into dust, and because the murderous aura contained the regulations of the Great Tao of Metal, it could similarly be devoured by it. Interesting. Ling Han revealed a smile, and wielded the sword as he advanced. He cut through all the obstacles along the way as if he were walking on flat ground. After close to an hour, the Divine Demon Sword suddenly stopped devouring. Then the blade of the sword began to tremble slightly. Multiple symbols of the Great Tao appeared on the blade, but they immediately collapsed and were replaced by new symbols of the Great Tao, which were even more complex and complete. It had advanced. A 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. If this cultivator wanted to break through, he would have to make countless preparations, and would also have to endure heavenly tribulation and whatnot. But the Divine Demon Sword succeeded in a single step. That was because for the Divine Demon Sword, there was only one grade above godly metal, and that was divine metal. What 1-star pseudo-divine metal, 2-star pseudo-divine metal? Those were all artificial classifications, and in reality, there was no such standard of heaven and earth. Then, it was only a small step for the Divine Demon Sword to advance to a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool, and it naturally succeeded. Ling Han continued to advance. As the Divine Demon Sword became stronger and stronger, its devouring ability also became more and more astonishing. Previously, it could only completely absorb the metal essence within a radius of 30 meters. But now, it could reach 60 meters. It was guaranteed that wherever the Divine Demon Sword passed, there would definitely not be the slightest bit of metal regulations in this area. Small tower, what exactly is devouring metal? He couldn't help but ask. Divine metal? And there is a sliver of a possibility that it could surpass all divine metal in the future, and become a unique existence. Small Tower said calmly. You mean to say devour divine metal, and continue to advance? At least it's not too ridiculously stupid. Small Tower was clearly praising someone, but no matter how one listened, it did not make one feel happy. How extravagant. Divine metal, even celestial kings could not each have one, and forge it into a celestial tool. But the Divine Demon Sword needed to use divine metal as nourishment, and continue to grow. Eating divine metal to grow, even ghosts would know how awesome it was. Ling Han couldn't help but be fascinated. Perhaps when he became a celestial king, when he became a high-level celestial king, he could give it a try. If he could really obtain a supreme celestial tool, wouldn't that be very fun? He snickered, and did not think so far ahead for now. The first step was to let the Divine Demon Sword become a true celestial tool. Ling Han, what are you doing here instead of celebrating up there? Could it be that you are doing something shameful? As a mocking voice spoke, a person appeared behind him. Lan Tianyu. Chapter 2026. Lan Tianyu's black hair was loose, and he had a wild and unrestrained charm. Lan Tianyu. Ling Han nodded, sheathed his sword, and turned to face this formidable opponent. Lan Tianyu grinned. I heard from Xiao Jun that you tried to bewitch people in the silent room. I knew you were unreliable, and kept an eye on you in secret. As expected, I accidentally discovered that you were missing, and after searching for a while, I finally found you again. So what? Ling Han said indifferently. Since he was discovered, he could only fight. Was he afraid? I knew that a person like you wouldn't be recruited. You pretended to agree just to save your life. However, I'm really curious. Why did you suddenly think of going underground? Did you discover something? Lan Tianyu was a little curious. Ling Han smiled. Oh, is there something underground that can't be seen? Lan Tianyu stared at Ling Han for a while, and said, though I find it hard to believe this is true, I have to admit that a person like you wouldn't do meaningless things. So you must have discovered something, right? Discovered what? Ling Han was still smiling calmly. Lan Tianyu had been trying to fish for information from Ling Han, wanting to know if Ling Han really knew that there was a source power hidden underground. If it was true, then it was very likely that Ling Han wasn't alone, but had the support of a powerful figure behind him. Then they definitely couldn't be careless. Putting aside the fact that the island master was only in the ascending origin tier, there was still the celestial king tier. Even if they reached the celestial king tier, so what? They were equivalent to pests in the world that everyone wanted to beat up. Here, there is a source power, Lan Tianyu said word by word as he stared at Ling Han's face, paying attention to the changes in his expression. Ling Han remained calm and said, I'm also quite curious. Your brother is in the ascending origin tier. So why are you so disappointing, only in the dividing soul tier? Lan Tianyu humphed and said, my cultivation level is slow, but that is because I have cultivated every cultivation level to perfection. When I advance into the 9 lotus tier, which is equivalent to the ascending origin tier, I will be able to defeat everyone in this cultivation level. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. I say, can you not be so full of yourself? Your aptitude is just a bit stronger than a king, barely reaching the emperor realm. If it weren't for the fact that you can borrow external power, what qualifications do you have to talk about being invincible in the same realm? Trash like you can be found everywhere in the eastern and western immortal realms. This was a bit too much. To say nothing of emperor tiers, there weren't even that many king tiers. However, Ling Han himself was a peak monarch tier, and the people he came into contact with were all prodigies. In his eyes, there were naturally prodigies everywhere. Lan Tianyu was so angry that he exploded. He glared fiercely at Ling Han, his face revealing a strong killing intent. He had always been proud of his own talent, and thought that the heroes of the world were nothing more than this. It was just that he had always been buried in this area, which was why he had not been able to make a name for himself. But Ling Han actually dared to look down on his own talent? He couldn't tolerate this. This was something he definitely couldn't tolerate. You actually dare to question my talent? His face was filled with fury. Ling Han scoffed. I am now at the late stage of the Yang Soul tier. What cultivation level are you equivalent to? And even if you borrowed the power of some lousy celestial spirit, you would only be able to fight me to a draw. What qualifications do you have to mention the word talent in front of me? Lan Tianyu couldn't help but be speechless. His cultivation level was equivalent to the peak stage of the Yin Soul tier. If he didn't have the support of the power of the celestial spirit, his battle prowess would only be invincible in the Earth Soul tier. He still wasn't qualified to advance into the Heavenly Soul tier. Compared to Ling Han, he was indeed far inferior. The other was really a genius, and far more outstanding than him. This made him go crazy with jealousy. Since he was inferior, then he would kill him. This way, no one would be more outstanding than him. At first, I wanted to let you live, but you are seeking your own death, Lan Tianyu said menacingly. Ling Han laughed loudly, and lightly shook the divine demon sword in his hand. Then let's battle. His figure moved, and he charged towards Lan Tianyu. Previously, he had let the other have a small advantage, not because his strength was inferior, but because he didn't want to use his trump card. But a battle of life and death was different. He would use his full strength, and blast the other into pieces. Most importantly, the divine demon sword had risen to the level of a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool, which was equivalent to the level of a heavenly soul. Shwa, the sword swept past, splitting the sky and splitting the clouds. The surrounding mud and stones were instantly annihilated, turning into nothingness. Lan Tianyu was shocked. There was clearly no change in Ling Han's cultivation level, but his battle prowess had risen many times, extremely inconceivable. It was that sword. It's just a sword, and it can actually increase your battle prowess so much. Truly shocking. Lan Tianyu was even more jealous. The other's talent was higher than his, and he even possessed a supreme celestial sword. This is mine, he roared loudly. Hong. His whole body was enveloped by a black aura, and a black lotus with 7 petals appeared between his brows, counterattacking towards Ling Han. Pung! Ling Han's sword swept past, and Lan Tianyu was instantly sent flying, crashing into the wall with a prung, and then crashing back, causing his whole body to tremble, and the discomfort was indescribable. But Ling Han had already caught up, and another sword slashed over, giving him no time to be shocked. He could only roar like a tiger, and spit out a streak of black air from his mouth, turning into a monstrous flame, and a black symbol formed. This was definitely not a symbol of Great Tao. Ling Han could be sure that this was different from the Great Tao of heaven and earth that he understood. If it was a symbol of Great Tao, then it would interweave and resonate with the regulations of heaven and earth, and not like this. Wait. Ling Han could sense that above, from the direction of the ancient castle on the island, there was a mysterious power transmitted over, fusing with this symbol, and thus increasing the power of this black symbol. The black symbol struck over, its power extremely strong. Ling Han sneered lightly, and his left hand formed a fist and punched out. Pung! In the collision, this temporarily open cave instantly trembled violently, mud and stones falling, and it was on the verge of collapse. Haha, your strength is only SOSO. I'll take your head. Lan Tianyu laughed loudly, putting aside the celestial sword in Ling Han's hand. His battle prowess did not change in the slightest. Previously, he could already gain the upper hand, and now it was naturally the same. Is that so? Ling Han punched out again and again, not dodging Lan Tianyu's attacks at all. He was meeting his opponent head-on. He still had matters to attend to, and needed to collect the source energy of heaven and earth. He was not in the mood to waste time with his opponent. Then he would finish the battle as soon as possible, and end this opponent's life. Courting death. Lan Tianyu laughed coldly. He had the protection of celestial spiritual energy, and his defensive power was incomparably terrifying. If fighting him head-on was not courting death, then what was? I hope you can always be so stubborn, Ling Han said with a smile. Pung pung pung. After exchanging more than 10 punches in a row, Lan Tianyu could not help but turn pale with fright, because he had already been struck until every bone in his body was groaning. But Ling Han was completely fine. How was this possible? You, what kind of protective immortal tool are you wearing? He did not dare to fight head-on with Ling Han again. In his mind, if his defensive power was stronger than his, then there was only one possibility. Ling Han sneered. He could not be bothered to waste words with his opponent, and simply summoned the 9 heavens flame. Normally, this divided soul had always been comprehending the great Tao under the reincarnation tree, and this allowed Ling Han to improve at all times. His main body used the heaven-extinguishing 9 swords, while his divided soul was wrapped in fierce flames, the 9 heavens flame burning the heavens and boiling the earth. Today he continued to write. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 2028. This middle-aged man didn't look any different from an ordinary person, and didn't have a majestic and overbearing aura circulating around him. If there was anything different, it would be the black lotus mark between his brows. A lotus with 9 petals, so black that it made one's heart palpitate. Was this the island master? Ling Han waited in the black tower, not acting rashly. The astral origin green gold was just ahead, and even through the black tower, he could feel the seemingly endless power of heaven and earth. Gold was sharp and destructive, destroying everything. He couldn't help but frown. Although the astral origin green gold was close at hand, how could he collect it? Coming out was an act of seeking death. Fortunately, the middle-aged man didn't seem to want to collect the astral origin green gold for the time being. Xiao, at this moment, a figure descended from above, avoiding the stirring sharp aura, and stood side by side with the middle-aged man. Both of them had a black lotus mark between their brows, both with 9 petals. Brother Che. The original middle-aged man nodded at the newcomer. The newcomer was also a middle-aged man, and his figure was more sturdy. His eyes stared at the astral origin green gold. Brother Lan, we've waited for millions of years, and it's finally time to harvest. Hehe, we haven't wasted time these years. With this as a base, we've sent many people into the continent to spread the righteousness of our sect, the first middle-aged man said with a smile. He was the island master of this island, named Lan Tianyang. The second man, his surname was Che, and his name was Che Yuanhua. He also laughed and said, "There are too many fools in the world. Our sect's cultivation system is obviously more brilliant, but all of them strongly resist, almost causing our sect to collapse. We have no choice but to keep a low profile. These days will soon end, and we will be the ones to create history." Both of their eyes lit up, appearing extremely excited. "After collecting this source of heaven and earth, Lord Sect Master will definitely reward us greatly, and there'll be hope to break through to the 10 Lotus tier." Ling Han listened from inside the Black Tower, and a great wave of shock surged in his heart. This was a large organization, and Midway Island was only the tip of the iceberg. 10 Lotus. The lotus between their eyebrows had 9 petals, so the 10 Lotus should have grown another petal. Lan Rawaji had said before that the island mistress was equivalent to the ascending origin tier. If he was 9 Lotus, then 10 Lotus could possibly refer to the great perfection of the ascending origin tier, the consummate level, or even the celestial king tier. Additionally, the people that were sent out were all at the ascending origin tier. So what about the important figures of the sect? What about the sect leader himself? What cultivation level did he have? Based on the conversation between the two of them, there were actually people who had already entered the eastern and western immortal realms, spreading their cultivation system and promoting their immortal essences. Perhaps this was only popular among the lower classes, so Ling Han had no idea. However, one had to understand that even though experts were mighty, and in a battle, even an immortal king could decide the battle situation. For the world, the lowest level creatures were the true foundation. If most of the low-level beings cultivated another martial art system, then this world would not be far from collapsing. Ling Han found it strange. If this world collapsed, what good would it do to these people? In other words, they didn't even know the dangers of doing so. They were completely bewitched by the temptation of increasing their strength. Then, what kind of power was trying to destroy this world? Ling Han was shocked. According to Small Tower, heavenly venerables should be the strongest beings in the celestial realm, and had truly transcended the control of this world. The original master of the Black Tower was such a supreme being. However, he was dead. Killed by who? Was it the founder of this other cultivation system? All of a sudden, countless thoughts ran through Ling Han's mind, and he felt a chill in his limbs. This level of struggle had far surpassed the scope of his ability. Even Ninth Heaven celestial kings were not qualified to participate, and could only be reduced to cannon fodder. Ji Wuming had reincarnated, and looked like he represented justice. Could it be that he had also realized such a great danger, and that was why he was so resolute? Ling Han asked himself, if the celestial realm's survival was at stake, then for the sake of his family, lovers and friends, would he sacrifice a portion of the elites and geniuses of the celestial realm? He didn't dare to face the answer. For the sake of the bigger picture, it was necessary to sacrifice a few individuals. Anyone would say this, but who would be willing to be sacrificed? For example, some people said that as long as Ling Han was willing to commit suicide, then the celestial realm would be safe forever. Otherwise, it would be destroyed. Then, would Ling Han be willing to give up his own life? Just as he was struggling with his thoughts, Ling Han felt his hands tighten and warm at the same time. The Empress and Hunyo had already grabbed onto one of his hands, one on the left and one on the right. This immediately calmed his raging heart. His will was firm, for the sake of those he loved. So what if he had to become a demon? Brother Lan, it's about time to begin, right? Che Yuanhua asked. Lan Tianyang nodded and said, Brother Che, let's channel the death spirit technique together. All right. The two great elites pressed their hands together. Wang, suddenly, a mysterious power surged, turning into a hand that grabbed out at the green-gold heavenly origin. Wang! A flash of sword light immediately slashed out from the green-gold heavenly origin, shattering this large hand into pieces. And I do Luo. Che Yuanhua and the Empress chanted some kind of technique at the same time. Wang, the two stone statues in front of the ancient castle immediately responded, sending over a strange power. This power was incompatible with the Tao of heaven and earth, and immediately triggered a reaction from the heaven and earth. Quang, Dark clouds rolled over in the skies above the island, and lightning interweaved. There was actually going to be a heavenly tribulation descending. Another cultivation system was not tolerated by this heaven and earth. The speed at which Che Yuanhua and the Empress chanted increased. One after another, characters flew out, suppressing the green gold heavenly origin like mountains one after another, causing this source power of heaven and earth to continuously tremble as if in fear. It wanted to fly away, yet was unable to do so. Ling Han showed an expression of shock. These two were clearly only in the ascending origin tier. And logically speaking, they should not be able to do anything to a source power of heaven and earth. But they really seemed to be suppressing the green gold heavenly origin. He sensed the mysterious power from the statues in the ancient castle. And this was also what shocked him the most. What exactly was that thing that could actually suppress the source power of heaven and earth? No, this was not collecting the source power of heaven and earth, but rather destroying it. Ling Han himself possessed 3 source powers of heaven and earth, and he could sense that this mysterious power was incredibly annoying to him. It was like water and fire, completely unable to coexist. Whoever had the upper hand meant that the other party would head towards destruction. Che Yuanhua and the Empress' strength was indeed insufficient, but they had drawn upon the power of the stone statue, and could even obliterate the source power of heaven and earth. This was too shocking. Obliterating the source power of heaven and earth is equivalent to giving the heaven and earth a heavy blow, Small Tower said slowly. The source power of heaven and earth was equivalent to the child of the heaven and earth. Thus, obliterating the source power of heaven and earth would cause great pain and sorrow, and it was a kind of great harm. They could not be allowed to continue. Ling Han planned to draw upon the power of the Black Tower. Even if he could not subdue this source power of heaven and earth, he would at least cause trouble for Che Yuanhua and the Empress. He could not allow them to obliterate the green gold heavenly origin so easily. His strength was indeed insufficient, but the Black Tower was not weak. That was the treasure of a heavenly venerable. Hong. Just at this moment, a flash of light shot down from above, and then a figure descended from the skies. Xiaogu. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.